called her skill worthless. The first man who tested that theory brought a tank. He was wrong.
On her 8th birthday, in front of 200 nobles, Ryan's father told the kingdom to forget her name. He used the word disgrace twice. He used the word exile once. He sent her to the frontier garbage dump at the eastern edge of the realm and ordered the family carriage to leave without looking back. She bowed. She thanked him. She did not break. The ceremonial hall smelled of incense and old stone and the kind of expensive perfume that was supposed to make a place feel important. 200 guests arranged themselves along the marble in rows so straight that someone had measured. The Scythian crest hung from every banner, embroidered in silver thread, exactly as proud as it had looked at every previous ceremony Ryan had been dressed up for and paraded through. She stood at the altar in a white dress that had been fitted 3 times in the past month and still felt like someone else's costume. Her hair was brushed and tied with a ribbon she had not chosen. The shoes pinched. Every adult in the room was watching her, and almost none of them were looking at her as a person. They were looking at the next Scythian, the next knight commander, the next court mage, the next reason for her father to puff out his chest in the capital and tell other counts that the lineage was still strong. She was not, in any sense that mattered, the daughter they thought they had. The priest stood beside her. He was old enough that his hands shook slightly when he held things, and he had performed this ceremony for the Scythian line for so many years that his voice no longer carried weight on its own, only the words did. He read from a scroll about destiny and the gift of the creation god. He set the skill crystal against her forehead. The crystal warmed. She felt nothing dramatic. No light filled her vision. No voice spoke from the heavens. The crystal simply settled into a color that meant something to him and nothing to her. He read the result quietly to himself first, the way someone reads bad news a second time before delivering it. Then his hands shook a little more. He lifted his voice for the audience that had gone perfectly still. Lady Ryan's skill is recycle shop. The effect seems to be the ability to pick up garbage and to buy and sell like a merchant. The hall did not breathe. Here is what nobody in that hall could have guessed. Inside that long-held silence, at 8 years old, in the white dress and the too tight shoes, Ryan did not feel humiliated. She did not feel small. She had been waiting for that crystal to tell her family who she actually was for as long as she could remember being Ryan Scythian. She knew exactly what the priest had announced. She knew exactly what it meant, and she was fighting. With every muscle she had ever trained on noble politeness, the urge to start laughing. The crystal had given her the right answer. Her father was the first one to break the silence. He repeated the word the priest had said. He repeated it like he was testing the theory that he had misheard. Then he made a sound Ryan had never heard him make in 8 years of being his daughter, somewhere between a laugh and a curse, and definitely not a laugh. Her twin brothers, on the right side of the dais, did not bother with restraint. Gokani went first. He had spent 8 years waiting to laugh at his sister in a public hall, and he had practiced the volume. Misuni followed half a second later, loud enough to carry, and reminded the assembled nobility that Ryan had once been called a prodigy, just so that everyone would understand the irony. She kept her eyes on the floor. There was a small chip in the marble near the dais, about the size of a thumbnail. Someone had probably dropped a ceremonial sword there years ago. In her previous life, she had repaired worse than that with a shop cloth and a tin of wax in 20 minutes. She was thinking, with all the focus she had, about how the new skill would handle that chip. Her father's voice, when it returned, was the voice he used to deliver verdicts at his estate court. It was the voice that meant a decision had already been made, and any further discussion was an offense. He told the hall that there was no place in his house for a garbage picker. He used the word disgraced twice. He used her name a 3rd time, each time shorter, each time emptier, until her name was an instruction rather than a person. He told her to leave. He told her where. The frontier city of Dead End, the salt wasteland between the Death Sea and the White Bone Tree Sea, the territory the Scythian family used as a dumping ground for the garbage of an entire province, where she was apparently going to go and stay and presumably die, because that was what the Lords of Dead End historically did. She dropped to one knee. She bowed her head exactly the way the etiquette tutor had taught her. She thanked her father and her brothers for taking care of her until that day. She asked permission to go. He did not look at her. The brothers laughed once more for symmetry. The priest looked like he wanted to say something kind and could not find words that would not also offend the Count. She stood up. She walked the length of the marble hall in shoes she would never wear again. The guests parted to let her through. The doors closed behind her, and the moment she was alone in the corridor, out of sight, out of earshot, she stopped, put a hand against the cool wall, and let her mouth make the smile she had been holding back for the last 20 minutes. She had a skill called Recycle Shop. She was being sent to a frontier of garbage. They thought they had won. The carriage they sent her in was the one they used when they had to send something somewhere and did not particularly care if it arrived. The leather on the seats was cracked. One window did not close. The driver was a hire from the Territory Edge who had clearly received the message that the new Lord of Dead End was not worth conversation. He nodded to her when she climbed in. He flicked the reins. He did not look at her again for 2 days. That was fine. She needed 2 days to think. She had lived 8 years in a noble family she had never wanted, performing rituals she did not believe in, eating dinners with people who would have been disappointed in her, even if the crystal had named her the strongest mage in the kingdom. They had stopped seeing her long before that ceremony. The ceremony had simply made the not seeing official and given her a way out. The driver dropped her at a fork in the road, pointed toward the edge of the territory, and drove away without looking back. She had a small bag. She had the ribbon out of her hair already, wadded into a pocket. She had a destination. She started walking. The road was packed dirt. The sea wind reached her before she saw the water. The smell, salt and rot, and a chemical edge underneath was new. She should have been afraid of it. She was, instead, paying attention to it. New things had qualities. Qualities had uses. She was already running a mental inventory of what the air, by itself, might be turned into if she had the right tools. The mansion was at the end of the road. She knew it was the mansion because someone had nailed a wooden sign to a stake in the ground that said Lord's Residence in faded paint, and the building behind the sign was the only thing for half a mile that anyone could pretend was a residence at all. The roof was gone. 2 of the 4 walls had given up. The yard was a knee-deep collection of rusted weapons, broken pottery, dead vines, splintered fences, and at least 1 carriage that had been gutted for parts and left to rust into the ground. Ryan stopped at the sign. She read it twice, the way the priest had read the crystal. She started laughing. A small crowd had been watching her from the road. Half a dozen villagers, most of them thin enough that their cheekbones did the speaking for them. One of them said, loud enough for her to hear because they wanted her to hear, that the new lord was just a child, that someone had probably exiled her here to get rid of an extra mouth, and that she would die before the next moon. Another agreed. A third said the territory had eaten 3 lords already and would eat this one too. They were not being cruel. They were quoting their own experience back at her, the same way she quoted the etiquette tutor when she bowed. She did not respond. She walked past them, past the sign, into the yard. Behind her, she heard the conversation continuing. They had decided she was going to die. They were already moving on to the next topic. She picked the first thing her eye landed on, a fence post, snapped at the base, half buried in mud. She pulled it out. The wood was rotted at one end and dense at the other, where someone had once attached an iron bracket. She turned it over in her hand. She closed her eyes for a second to focus. The skill activated. 2 windows opened in front of her, translucent, hovering, lit faintly with a color that was somewhere between green and blue. The first window listed the fence post properties. The second window listed the actions she could take with it. Buy, store, repair, change specification, look up market value. Numbers floated next to each option. The skill was not a metaphor. The skill was a tool, and the tool was sitting in the air in front of her, asking her what she wanted to do with the broken piece of wood she was holding. She started to laugh again, a different laugh this time, quieter. She bought the fence post. The skill called the currency recycle points, and it deposited 15 of them into her account when the fence post dissolved in her hand into a small pulse of light. 15. From a piece of wood that had been lying in mud since before she was born. She looked around the yard. Every object in the yard was a transaction. She worked for an hour. She did not stop. She did not eat. She did not look up. The pots near the well, the old saddle in the doorway, the rusted helmets in what had once been a flower bed, the carriage frame that the villagers had tried and failed to scavenge. Every piece of it into the skill, out as points. The numbers climbed. 300, 800, 2,000, 4,000, 5,800 recycle points. By the time the sun started to lean toward orange, 5,800. Ryan sat on a tipped barrel and tried to remember the last time she had felt this excited about anything in 8 years. She could not. The repair function was the next thing she tried. The interface let her select an item from her inventory and apply a restoration cost. She had kept one rusted short sword unsold, partially because the metal had a curve to it that interested her, and partially because she wanted to test what repair felt like. The cost was 300 points. She authorized it. The blade pulsed once. The rust vanished. The wooden handle, which had been soft with rot, firmed up into something that might have been ash or oak. The pommel cap, which had been dented, popped back into a perfect dome. The whole thing looked like it had come off a smith's bench that morning. She tested the edge against her thumb. It cut clean. A repair function. For 1/20th of what she had earned in the same hour she would have spent trying to find a smith. She sat with the sword across her knees and thought for a long, quiet moment about everything that was going to be possible with this skill and this territory and the rest of her life. She had been told her whole short life that the world had decided who she was. The world had ranked her. The world had handed her a verdict at age 8 and walked away. The world had been wrong. She activated the next menu option, Market Survey. She had not used it yet. The interface explained that it scanned the surrounding region for items of value and ranked them by rarity. She tapped the prompt. The yard around her lit up with little markers. Dozens of low-rarity items she had not bothered with. Copper wiring, broken horseshoes, a kettle she had walked past 3 times. None of them mattered for a deeper read. The interface also ranked things by region, expanding the scan outward. The territory glowed in tiers. The slum behind the mansion had a few mid-grade points of interest. The forest line had nothing remarkable. The Death Sea, off to the east, where the wind was coming from, had one marker. One marker alone, glowing at the highest rarity tier the system could display. The label read SSR. Ryan had been a noble for 8 years. In all that time, she had never personally encountered an item rated above the second highest rarity tier. The system was telling her there was an SSR class item somewhere on the Death Sea shore, within scanning range, and she had earned 5,800 recycle points in 1 hour of cleaning up a yard that nobody else wanted to clean up. She tucked the repaired short sword into her belt. She rolled the white ceremonial dress sleeves up to her elbows. She started walking east, around the side of the ruined mansion, toward the sound of the sea. The sun was almost down. The Death Sea, when she crested the small rise behind the mansion, was the color of poured lead. Flat, gray, wrong, in a way she could not put words to the first time she looked at it. There was no horizon. The water just kept going into haze. The smell she had noticed on the road had a source: salt, rotted things, and a chemical undertone that the villagers probably attributed to the curse, and that Ryan, in her previous life, would have called industrial runoff. The Death Sea pulled in everything that was thrown into any coast on the kingdom's map. Most of what entered the sea sank eventually. Some things drifted, the lightest of them, and the things the sea did not want, washed back to this one black sand shore. The villagers called it cursed. She was looking at it as a delivery system. The interface was still up. The marker was on the beach, maybe a quarter mile down the shore. She started running. 8-year-old legs, a too tight pair of shoes that she should have already left behind, and a beach made of black sand that pulled at every step. She had not run like that in 8 years either. Her old life had not had occasion to run toward anything good. The marker pulsed steady ahead of her. The sun went lower. The wind came off the water in a steady cold push, and she welcomed it. Every step was a step further from the family she would never see again, and a step closer to whatever the world had thrown into the sea and forgotten. Whatever it was hers now. The recycle shop rules said so. The marker resolved into a shape on the sand ahead, something the wrong size for an object, something the right size for a person. She kept running. The closer Ryan got, the more sure she became that the system marker had not glitched. It was a person. She had washed up face down, the way debris washes up. The waves had pushed her halfway up the beach and lost interest. Her hair was long and silver and tangled with seaweed. Her dress was a noble's dress, or had been, before the salt water took it apart in its own slow way. The right side of her face had a burn-like black mark on it that no salt water had put there. She was not moving. She might already have been gone. Ryan knelt beside her on the wet sand. She touched her shoulder. The interface activated. The window opened in the air above the body. Ryan read it once, then she read it again. Former Duke's daughter Anastasia. SSR rarity. Buy price, 0. Notes attached. Curse disfigurement applied externally, multiple lacerations, drowning in progress, prognosis terminal without immediate intervention. Rian sat back on her heels, sand cold against her knees, ocean wind pulling at the ribbon she had pocketed earlier. She looked at the menu. Repair cost, 5,000 recycle points. She had 5,500. This was, in a strict economic sense, the worst possible decision she could make. A noble's full restoration would empty her. She had no income beyond the yard she had already cleaned. She had no shelter beyond a roofless mansion. The girl on the sand had been thrown away by the system, by the kingdom, and presumably by people she had once trusted enough to walk into a sea about. She also had an SSR education in noble protocol. She could read and write in court script. She could keep a ledger. She could run an estate. She had been given, by her circumstances, every skill that the territory Ryan now technically owned was going to need someone to perform. And she had been priced at 0 because the system measured what she currently was, not what she could be again. Ryan authorized the repair. The light came up around the woman's body. It was not the holy light Ryan had read about in books. It was a soft geometric pattern, faintly warm, that settled over her body and started overwriting damage. The salt left her skin. The acid burns on her arms closed. The black curse mark on her face unwound itself like a thread being pulled loose. Her hair lifted, dried, settled clean. The dress did not restore. Repair worked on her, not on what she was wearing, but the body underneath stopped being something washed up on a beach and started being something asleep. She drew a breath, slowly, like someone surfacing. Her eyes opened. They were the color of amethyst. She blinked at the moon as if she did not understand what it was doing there. She blinked at Ryan, small, dirty, kneeling beside her with her hands in the sand, and her face moved through 3 different expressions before it stopped on the one that was almost smiling. "I thought I was dead," she said. "You were going to be." She tried to sit up. Her body cooperated. She lifted a hand to her cheek where the curse had been, and her fingers passed over smooth skin and stopped, just hovering there. She looked at Ryan again. "You saved me?" Ryan told her the truth, in the simplest version it was available in. She told her she had washed up here. She told her that the recycle shop rules said a discarded thing belonged to whoever picked it up. She told her that, as of about 90 seconds ago, she was hers. The woman did not flinch. The opposite. Something in her shoulders unbent that had probably been bent since before she walked into the sea. Her breath hitched once, and she pressed the heel of her palm against her mouth and turned her face away. Ryan gave her a little time. When she looked back, the smile she made was the kind people make on their way to crying. She slid off the sand, knelt properly, the way nobles knelt, the way Ryan had been drilled to kneel as a child, and bowed her head until her forehead touched the back of Ryan's hand. "This saved life and body," she said. "I dedicate it all to you." Ryan considered the line. It was the kind of line that meant exactly what it said. She considered also that she was 8 years old, alone, broke, and had just acquired a full-grown noblewoman who had been a duke's daughter that morning. "I don't need a sword or a shield." The words came out small but firm. "I need accounting. I need correspondence. I need someone who knows how an estate runs. Can you do that?" "My lord, stand up, please. The sand is cold." Anastasia stood. Her knees were unsteady, but only for a second. She introduced herself, formally, in the cadence Ryan remembered from court tutors. Anastasia of the House Kreis, formerly betrothed, formerly a daughter, currently nobody's. Ryan told her she was Ryan. She did not give a house name. She had stopped having one that morning. They walked back to the mansion in the dark, Ryan's hand in Anastasia's, because Anastasia insisted on holding it, and Ryan did not have the energy to refuse. And Ryan tried to remember the last time anyone had held her hand at all. The mansion was as bad on the inside as it had looked on the outside. Anastasia stopped in the doorway and tried to keep her face from showing what she was thinking. Ryan told her not to bother. The house was not broken. It was just tired. Ryan would give it a shoulder rub. That had been her grandmother's line in her previous life, in a small antique shop in the mountains where the old woman had repaired things people had thrown out for 40 years. She had said it about every object she ever picked up. Ryan had said it without meaning to, and Anastasia had heard her say it, and Anastasia probably filed it somewhere important. Ryan cleared the master bedroom by inventorying what was salvageable and selling what was not. 450 recycle points, enough for partial work. She used repair on the canopy bed, blackwood frame restored, mattress firmed, sheets returning from gray to white. She used specification change on a moth-eaten curtain to make Anastasia a towel and a soft nightgown the color of the moon. She closed 2 of the broken windows by transforming a stack of old shutters back into glass. The room became a room. Anastasia, in the silk nightgown that had been a curtain 20 minutes earlier, stood in the middle of the floor and looked at the bed like she was afraid of touching it. She tried to thank Ryan, and her voice did not cooperate. Ryan told her to go to sleep. "My lord, Anastasia." She stopped. "Sleep." She climbed into the bed. She fitted herself into one corner of it, as if she expected to be told she had taken too much room. After a moment, she said, almost too quiet to hear, that she had not slept indoors in a long time, and that the bed was very large, and that, if it would not be presumptuous, she would prefer not to be alone. Ryan climbed in too. Anastasia fell asleep, with her hand wrapped around the edge of Ryan's sleeve. Ryan lay awake for a while, listening to the wind through the missing roof tiles 2 rooms over, thinking about how much of an estate one person could run if she did not have to fight for the right to do it. Then she slept also. The territory needed 2 things faster than it needed anything else. It needed a steady source of points, and it needed someone capable of fighting. The first Ryan could solve in the slum. The second was a separate problem that she expected would solve itself eventually, given that the territory was a magnet for things the world had stopped wanting. Anastasia and Ryan walked into Dead End City the next morning. Anastasia wore the cleaned remnants of her noble dress, repaired by Ryan's skill, plain enough now to pass for a tradeswoman's clothing. Ryan worked the street as they walked, buying every piece of garbage her hand passed near, watching the points climb. They were 2 blocks into the slum when a group of thug adventurers stepped out of an alley and decided, based on Anastasia's posture and Ryan's dress, that the 2 of them were a tax opportunity. The leader had a sword. He waved it at Ryan to make sure she noticed. He demanded a toll for passage. He included some implications about what would happen if they did not pay. Anastasia, beside Ryan, lifted her hand in a way that might have been the start of a magic gesture, or might have been a bluff. Ryan did not need her to find out which. He swung. Ryan stepped sideways. The sword's tip touched the dirt. She bought it. The blade vanished from his hand. He was holding a hilt in air. He stared at the hilt like it had betrayed him. Ryan asked him, in the polite child's voice her etiquette tutor had drilled into her, whether he and his friends would also like to be processed as oversized refuse. The interface flickered helpfully in the air between them, ready to accept input. The thugs left at speed. The 2 of them kept walking. The scrapyard sat at the edge of the slum. 3 workers were standing in a circle around something they had been trying to break apart for what their faces suggested was a long while. The something was about Ryan's height and shaped like a person. Iron, rusted to the color of dried blood, fused into a single solid statue. Ryan touched it. Market research opened. Cursed Knight Karika. SSR rarity, military specialization. Encased in the man-eating iron armor, a cursed gear that fed on the wearer. Conscious, trapped, aware of every conversation that had happened in front of her since the day she had been left here. The workers told Ryan to take the statue if she could carry it. They said it was no good for scrap because it would not break. Ryan bought the statue, all of it, into her inventory. The workers stared at the empty space where it had been. The 2 of them left. Ryan pulled the statue out of inventory in the alley because there were no eyes. Anastasia stood at the alley's mouth, watching the street. The statue stood between them, leaning slightly forward, as if it had been preparing to take a step that had never finished. Ryan put her hand on the cold, rusted shoulder. She had heard the market research notes about consciousness. She wanted the knight inside to hear her before she did anything. It hurt, didn't it? Her voice was quiet. You were betrayed, and it was painful, and they left you here. The statue did not answer. The statue could not. Ryan authorized repair. She had 200 recycle points left after the short sword and the bedroom and the buyback on the way through the slum. 200 was not enough. The interface told her so. She authorized it anyway, dipped into the small reserve she had built from buying garbage on the walk, and kept feeding points until the cost bar finished. Light came up around the iron. The rust crackled and lifted in flakes. Plates began to separate, then to fall, hitting the alley floor with the heaviness of objects that had been one thing for a long time and were finally being permitted to be many. The cursed armor came apart from the body in pieces, like a dropped jigsaw. Underneath it was a young woman, late teens, fiery red hair cropped to her shoulders, a fighter's build that had been preserved inside the iron the way amber preserves an insect. She fell to one knee, caught herself with a hand on the dirt. She breathed. She stared at her hand. She made it move slowly, finger by finger, to confirm it would. She lifted her face to Ryan. "It moves," she said. The word was thinner than she wanted it to be. She tried again. "The rust is gone." "Yes." She looked at the pieces of her old armor scattered around her on the alley floor. She looked at her own arm, intact. She looked at Ryan, the small child in front of her, and her eyes filled in a way that was difficult to watch directly. "You repaired me." Ryan told her the same thing she had told Anastasia. "The recycle shop rules. The discarded belongs to whoever picks it up." Ryan picked her up. Ryan asked her, because her grandmother had taught her to ask, rather than to assume, whether she would consider being her bodyguard. Kirika's hand made a fist. She made it slowly, watching the fingers close. She drove the fist against the dirt, once, hard enough to leave a dent. She knelt fully. "My sword exists for you." She did not look up. "I will cut down any enemy. Stand up." Kirika stood. She rose to her full height for what might have been the first time since the day they had given her the armor, and the day they had locked her into it, and the day they had thrown her here. She introduced herself as Kirika Ironside, formerly squad leader of the Kingdom Knights, formerly a prodigy at 14, formerly an eyesore to a captain who could not stand being outdone by a girl half his age. Anastasia, from the alley's mouth, cleared her throat. The new arrival turned. The two of them assessed each other, fast. Two SSR rank women who had each just finished pledging their lives to Ryan within roughly 20 hours of each other. Anastasia introduced herself as the foremost aide of Lord Ryan's household. Kirika informed her that the foremost aide position was open to reapplication and that Anastasia should consider this her notice. They had been allies for less than 10 seconds. Ryan picked up the largest piece of fallen iron from the alley, ran a quick valuation on it, sold it for 40 recycle points, and told the two of them they were going home. They followed her. They argued the entire way. Ryan did not stop them. She had been alone for a long time, and she had decided, sometime in the last 24 hours, and in a way she did not yet have language for, that she did not have to be anymore. The morning Anastasia mentioned the church in the slum was the morning everything stopped being only about the mansion. The orphans, she said, had been left without their caretaker for over a week. The caretaker was a woman the slum called Sakura. The slum also called her the man-eating demon, but Anastasia, who had picked up the rumor through 3 filtered conversations and trusted her own filtering, said the rumor felt thinner than the woman it was attached to. The woman had vanished into the White Bone Tree Sea 7 days earlier. The children were hungry. They went to look. Kira walked point. Anastasia carried bread and dried fruit in a small sack. Ryan carried Market Survey, running quietly at the edge of her attention. The forest was as hot as the Kingdom records had warned it would be. The bone-pale trees baked the air between them into something that pressed against the chest. 2 miles in, the survey marker brightened. SSR rarity. Status, critical. They found her in a small clearing where the trees thinned. She was tall. She was an Oni. 2 horns, dark hair, a tail that should have moved and was not moving. One of the horns had cracked at the base. Heat was rising off her body in waves visible against the air. Market Survey opened uninvited and listed the diagnosis in a single line. Severe heat runaway, suppression damage, horn approaching necrosis, prognosis terminal within the hour. She heard them before she saw them. She tried to wave them back. She tried to tell them to stay away because if she lost control, she would not be able to stop. Her voice was thin and shaking, and she did not have the strength to lift her head. Kira stepped between her and Ryan. Anastasia, beside Ryan, started a defensive incant. Ryan walked past both of them and put her hand on the cracked horn. The Oni shuddered. She tried to push Ryan away with the last of her strength. Ryan authorized repair before either of her retainers could finish protesting. Light rolled out of her palm and into the bone of the horn. The crack closed. The heat in the clearing dropped all at once, like a window had been opened. The waves stopped rising off the Oni's skin. She slumped forward into the leaves. Then she lifted her face and looked at Ryan. And the look on her face was the look of someone discovering, for the first time in years, that the body she lived in was capable of being not in pain. "Cold," she said, quietly, almost wondering. "Feels good." Ryan told her her name. She told her she was the lord of the territory. She told her the children at the church were waiting for her. Sakura started crying. Then she laughed. Then she lunged forward and wrapped both arms around Ryan and held on so tightly that Anastasia and Kira together had to peel her off. The forest by then was already cooling. The church had been a real church before it had been a children's shelter, and it had been a real shelter before the roof had given up trying. The 10 children inside inside were arranged in a tight cluster against the far wall. Their leader was a boy named Tony, 8 or 9 years old, holding 2 younger sisters behind him with the practiced economy of someone who had been holding people behind him his entire life. Sakura went in first. The children saw her and broke out of their formation and reached her in a moving wall. She knelt and wrapped them all up in her arms and stayed like that for a long time. None of them said anything. The smallest one, couldn't have been more than 4, pressed her face into Sakura's collarbone and just breathed. Ryan let them have the moment. Then she knelt beside Sakura and offered the children the only thing she had brought from inventory that mattered: bread, soft and warm because she had repaired it on the way in, and milk that had not turned because she had refreshed it with specification change. Tony watched the bread. He did not take any. He looked at Ryan with the eyes of a child who had heard "good job" from adults before. "Adults lie," he said. He was not angry. He was reporting a fact. Sometimes. Ryan held the bread out a little farther. "I am also not most adults." He looked at his sisters. The smallest one was already chewing on Sakura's sleeve. He looked at the bread. He looked at Ryan. He took one piece, slowly, and broke it in half, and gave half to each of his sisters before he ate any himself. Ryan made the offer then. Garbage collection in the city, in exchange for shelter, 3 meals a day, a hot bath, and a small daily wage they could spend or save as they chose. Sakura, who had not let go of any of them, nodded once at Tony when he glanced at her for confirmation. He chewed. He swallowed. He looked at the broken stained glass over their heads as if he were running calculations against the church and against Ryan and against the prospect of warmth he had not had access to in a very long time. "You feed everyone first," he said, "before you ask us to do anything, or I am going to walk." "Done," he nodded. The nod was not yet trust. The nod was a contract. Ryan walked the children out of the church. None of them cried until they saw the mansion. The smallest one cried when she saw the bath. Tony cried later that night when he thought no one was watching. Into a bowl of stew Ryan had repaired from a hardtack ration into actual food. By the next morning, every child in the building had a job, a clean change of clothes, and the kind of careful expression that small people wear when they are trying not to believe something good is real until they have woken up at least 3 times inside it. 2 weeks later, the mansion was a different building. The orphans were running garbage routes through the city in pairs. Kira had been hunting in the White Bone Tree Sea, bringing back monster cores Ryan converted directly to recycle points. Anastasia had organized the household into a working shape: assignments, meal rotations, supply lists, with the calm certainty of someone who had been waiting her whole life to manage something competently. Sakura had returned to the church to gather the last of her things, and had returned with everything she owned, which fit in a small cloth bundle, and she had not slept anywhere except in arm's reach of Ryan since. The skill had crossed 150,000 recycle points. Ryan sat on the edge of the table, where Tony had laid out the week's accounts in his careful, slightly slanted handwriting, and she looked at the number for a long, quiet moment. She had been told once that a person could rebuild anything with enough patience and the right hands. She had not, until that afternoon, ever had both at the same time. Ryan told the household she was going to renovate the mansion. Tony asked, reasonably, whether 150,000 was enough for a building that had over 50 rooms. Ryan told him about the function she had been testing in the back of her menu for the last week: partial repair, walls and floors and ceilings only, the shell of every room, at a fraction of the cost of full restoration. The household understood the math the moment she explained it. Tony, in the way of children who had been treated like they were too small to count, asked why she had not used it sooner. Ryan told him the truth. She had been busy keeping people alive, and she had not had time to test the skill carefully until they had given her time. He went pink and ducked his head. The smallest of his sisters tugged on Ryan's sleeve and asked if Ryan would do the children's room first. Ryan told her no. She would do the children's room properly, as her second priority, after the structure. She would not give her a half-fixed wall when she could give her a real one. The little girl accepted that with the gravity of someone who understood that adults sometimes told the truth. Ryan worked the rest of the afternoon. The first floor went first. The hallway sealed itself. The holes in the dining room ceiling closed. The cracked floors smoothed back into single boards. The walls of the entry hall stopped letting drafts through. The defensive walls, outer shell, the original perimeter, reformed where they had collapsed. The children watched the light pass over each surface and clapped every time a draft stopped. Sakura tried to climb on Ryan twice. Anastasia and Kira together kept her contained. By dusk, the mansion's skeleton was sound. By full dark, every functional room had been finished. Ryan checked the balance. Under 3,000 recycle points left. She had spent everything except a small reserve, the way she had spent everything on Anastasia and on Kira. She had not yet repaired the servants' private rooms. She broke this fact to her retainers as gently as she could. She told them the kitchen was done, the dining room was done, the children's room was done, the defensive walls were done, and that she had not had enough left to fix their bedrooms, and that she would do those next, and that until then, they would need to share temporary quarters. The three of them looked at each other. Anastasia spoke first. As the household's foremost aide, she said, with the formal cadence she used when she was being deliberately reasonable, the only logical place for the staff to sleep until renovations completed was in the Lord's chamber. The Lord's chamber had a fully repaired bed. Security required proximity. Practicality required proximity. She had thought about this carefully. Kira agreed immediately and used the word nightly duty twice. Sakura had not spoken yet. Sakura was already taking off her overcoat. Ryan considered her options. She did the math. She considered the prospect of negotiating against 3 SSR rank women who had each, separately, decided that they were going to sleep in the same room as her, regardless of what she said. She conceded the negotiation. She went and found her pillow. The household accepted her surrender with grace. Tony, behind her in the hallway, looked at the chaos with an expression that was older than 9 years had any right to be, and asked if she was sure she was going to be okay. Ryan told him she would survive. He believed her, mostly. That was the night the household stopped being 3 retainers and a lord and started being a household. The household was still in pajamas when Tony came running into the kitchen yelling about a gang at the gate. Ryan went outside. Anastasia followed her. Kira and Sakura followed Anastasia. By the time they reached the yard, the household had taken positions without being told to. Kira a step ahead of Ryan, Anastasia 1 to her left, Sakura 1 to her right. Tony and the children pulled back behind the main house door. The discipline was something Anastasia had been teaching them in the mornings while Ryan was inventorying the kitchen. It looked like it had taken. The gang stood outside the gate, 12 women, all armed, all hard. They had the kind of posture you only get from years of needing to watch every direction. The leader was the tallest of them. She had an eye patch over her left eye, a prosthetic right arm assembled from iron plates and pins, dark skin, dark hair shaved on one side, and a smile that meant she had been doing this a long time and was unimpressed by what she saw. She introduced herself calmly, as if this were a business meeting. The starving wolf gang, out of the abandoned city to the north, looking for new accommodations because their old ones had become untenable. The mansion had recently come into operation again. They had decided it would do nicely. She invited Ryan to leave and not come back. The household behind Ryan went very still in a way that meant they were ready to make this end badly. Ryan asked them not to. She walked out past Kira to the gate. Up close, the gang leader was a head and a half taller than Ryan. She looked down at the 8-year-old in front of her, and the smile got slightly more amused. She told Ryan, with the patience of someone explaining something obvious, that Ryan was small and the world was hard, and she would not enjoy hurting her, but she also would not particularly mind if it became necessary. Ryan asked her, in the polite voice her etiquette tutor had hammered into her for years, why she wanted the mansion specifically. The smile shifted. The gang leader's eye narrowed slightly. She had been expecting bluster, and she had not gotten it. She gave Ryan a real answer instead. She had 18 women, 4 orphans, and 3 elderly people in her group. They had been chased out of their old base by a faction that had decided their territory was suddenly desirable. Winter was coming. The abandoned city would not hold them. The mansion would. Ryan considered this. She considered the household she had spent the last weeks building. She considered the fact that the gang's reasons sounded like every reason that had brought every other person in her house to her gate. She told the gang leader she had a different option than violence. She told her she would propose terms. The woman tilted her head. The terms were these: a duel, 1-on-1, no retainers, no gang. If Ryan won, the gang leader became her pet, her word, and the word she would have used regardless of what Ryan called it. Her gang became employed by the territory. They would have walls, food, and work. If she won, the mansion was hers, and Ryan would become the loser of the bet, with whatever that arrangement implied. She laughed at Ryan. The laugh was real. Then she stopped laughing and looked at the child again, a little harder, the way someone looks at a dog that has just done something dogs are not supposed to be able to do. "You're serious," she said. "I am." She thought about it for the count of 3. Then she stepped through the gate, walked into the yard, and held up her prosthetic arm in mock salute. She informed Ryan, in tones that her gang was meant to hear, that she accepted the generous offer and that she would do her best to be a kind owner once Ryan was hers. Ryan asked Anastasia to mark the duel ground. She told Sakura and Kira to stand back. She walked into the yard. Gara, that was the name she gave when Anastasia formally requested it, moved first. She did not announce the move. She lifted her prosthetic arm in the salute she had made earlier, and the prosthetic kept rising past her shoulder, and an iron plate at the wrist hinged sideways, exposing a barrel. Ryan was already running product appraisal on her by then. The interface had warned her about the hidden gun the moment they shook on the duel. She had been waiting for the trigger pull. It came. A short controlled burst, professional, 3 rounds aimed center mass. Ryan did not move. The interface activated buy on each round in flight. The bullets vanished one by one before reaching her. The brass spent on the ground from Gara's ejection port became 3 more transactions. Ryan's recycle point counter ticked up. The gang at the perimeter went quiet in a particular way. Gara's good eye narrowed. She fired again, longer this time. A real burst, 20 rounds, no mercy. Ryan bought all of them. Recycle point ticker climbed. Gara's ammunition ticker, on the indicator at her arm, dropped. She paused. She fired a 3rd burst, point blank, walking forward as she did. Each round vanished half a meter from Ryan's body. None of them ever touched her. Gara's counter hit 0. Her gun clicked. She stopped firing because there was nothing left to fire. She stared at her arm, then at Ryan, then at the empty air between them. "What?" she said. The word was not a question. It was the absence of a question. She was processing. Ryan told her, in the same polite voice she had used at the gate, that she had bought every bullet Gara had fired, and that the arm of her prosthetic was a registered material Ryan could now identify by composition, and that Gara should consider this her chance to come at her melee or surrender. Ryan gave her 3 seconds. Gara came melee. She closed the distance fast, much faster than Ryan expected from a woman her size, and brought the prosthetic arm down at her as a club. The forearm plates were heavy industrial iron designed for impact. Ryan stepped sideways at the last possible moment, put her hand against the elbow joint, and ran specification change on the metal alloy in the prosthetic. Targeted oxidation, accelerated corrosion. The skill warmed her palm. The metal under her hand started rusting from the inside. Gara felt it. Her swing finished into open air. She stared at her arm. The plates were turning the color of old blood. Pieces flaked off. Pins corroded. The hinges seized. By the time she had pulled back to look at it, the prosthetic had become a useless weight of crumbling iron from the elbow down. The structural pins eaten through. The gun assembly dead. The arm sagged at her side like something that had been a tool for a long time and was finally being permitted to stop. Ryan picked up the small backup pistol that had fallen out of Gara's belt during her charge. She held it up at arm's length, the way Kira would have, and she told Gara simply that the duel was over. Checkmate. Gara, fierce, hard-edged, the leader of the starving wolves, looked at her ruined prosthetic, looked at the small child holding her sidearm, and dropped to one knee in the dirt. Not for show. Her legs went. Her eyes stayed clear. She informed Ryan, in a voice that was steadier than any other woman she had defeated would have managed, that Ryan had won, that she surrendered, and that she should do whatever she needed to do. Ryan stepped closer. She took the prosthetic arm in her hands. The iron was still warm from oxidizing. "How long ago did you lose the original arm?" Gara blinked. The question was the wrong question for the moment she was expecting. She told her, a fight when she was 19, against 3 men who had decided one woman alone was easy money. She had killed all 3. She had also lost the right arm above the elbow. Ryan tracked the shoulder where the iron met the flesh. She ran market research, tagged the joint, opened the menu for partial repair. The estimated cost flickered. 28,000 recycle points. She authorized it. The light came up under her hand. Iron stopped being iron. Where the prosthetic met the body asked questions, and the skill answered them. The body wanted to know where the bone went. The skill remembered. The body wanted to know how the muscle threaded. The skill threaded it. Flesh and tendon and bone and skin built outward from Gara's shoulder in a long, warm pull, finger by finger, joint by joint, until Gara had a right arm again. Real. Hers. Made of her. She made a sound that should not need describing. The sound someone makes when they get back something they believed was gone forever. She stared at her hand. Both hands. She raised them and put them together and clenched the fingers and opened them and clenched them again. She did this for a long time. The yard was silent. Her gang at the perimeter was silent. Ryan's household behind her was silent. Sakura, who had watched the entire thing with her tail wagging at half speed, finally said, very quietly, that Ryan should probably let Gara have a moment. Gara looked up. the fierce one-eyed gang leader who had been swinging an iron prosthetic at Ryan 30 seconds earlier was now looking at the small lord in front of her with a face that was completely undefended. She crossed both wrists in front of her chest, the way you cross wrists when you offer them up to be bound. She looked Ryan in the eye and said, with terrible quiet certainty, that her life was Ryan's, that her gang was Ryan's, that whatever Ryan asked her to do, she would do, and that she had been waiting for someone to take her seriously for a very long time without knowing she had been waiting at all. Ryan helped her up. She told her she could keep her gang as her own command and that she needed help collecting trash. Gara laughed once, raw, like a sound she had not been allowed to make before, and she nodded. Ryan found out later, secondhand, what happened in Gara's room that afternoon. Anastasia carried up the new uniform Ryan had spec'd for Gara, black, stretchable, fitted to her actual body since Ryan had now seen her actual body fight, designed for the kind of ground combat she preferred. With a holster sized to the sidearm Ryan had returned to her, Anastasia knocked. Gara called her in. Anastasia laid the uniform on the bed and explained, in the formal household tone she had developed for delivering Ryan's decisions, that Ryan had adjusted the specifications herself once she understood Gara's combat style, and that Gara should accept it as a sign of being thoroughly indulged, because Ryan did that to everyone in her household, and there was no avoiding it. Anastasia closed the door behind her on the way out. She told Ryan later that she had heard, through the door, the sound of someone laughing into fabric, the way people laugh when they cannot afford to cry. She had also heard, very softly, what she said sounded like a single low bark, followed by a quiet, just kidding, followed by silence. That evening, Gara came downstairs in the new uniform. She did not say anything about the morning. She walked the perimeter of the yard once, slowly, with her right hand running along every fence post and every gate hinge, the way someone walks through a room they have decided to live in. Then she came to the kitchen, where Sakura was making dinner, and she introduced herself to the household formally for the first time. She did not call herself the leader of the starving wolves. She called herself the captain of Lord Ryan's military. The household accepted that quietly. Anastasia, beside Ryan, made a small note in her ledger. 18 new women, 4 new orphans, 3 new elderly, plus the 15 people Ryan had already been responsible for. The mansion was going to need bigger walls, bigger fields, a bigger food supply, bigger everything. Ryan sat at the kitchen table that night with Tony's ledger in front of her and ran the numbers. Then she ran them again. Then she started a new column for what they were going to need to build before the first frost. The territory had stopped being a place she was managing. It had started being a place she was responsible for. She did not yet know how much that distinction was about to cost her, but she was already running the numbers. The morning after Gara's first day in uniform, Ryan walked the household out to the dead patch behind the mansion and told them they were going to make food. The dead patch was the territory's salted ground, the soil left over from years of being a kingdom's dump. An old woman from the wolf gang, Bachan, looked at it the way old women in farming countries look at land that has been broken too long, and she informed Ryan, kindly, that nothing had grown there since before her grandmother's grandmother. Ryan told her she had heard her, and that the soil was not broken, just tired, and that she would give it a shoulder rub. Bachan laughed. The laugh was not unkind. They cleared the trees first, repaired axes, 6 of them, sharpened to working condition by specification change, distributed across the strongest backs in the household. Sakura took down a tree with one swing because Sakura was an Oni, and that was what Oni did. Gara took down 2 with her right hand because she was still working the joy of having a right hand out of her system. The orphans hauled the cut wood. Anastasia sorted the stacks. Kira watched the tree line. When the lot was clear, Ryan ran market survey on the soil. Salt poisoned, mana depleted, infertile. Buy price 0. She activated specification change. Mode, composition reset. Cost 20,000 recycle points. And the soil under her hand stopped being salt and started being earth. Then they needed compost. Gara dragged in a sack of city garbage from her morning route. Kira hauled in the corpse of a giant boar she had killed on her hunt. Sakura, who had been standing very close to Ryan, asked if she could help by adding herself to the pile, and was immediately dragged backward by Anastasia and Kira working together. Ryan piled the garbage and the boar in the middle of the cleared patch and ran specification change a second time. Mode, fermentation, accelerated. The pile collapsed inward and reformed as soil, black, rich, smelling of summer. Bachan, watching, made a sound that should not need describing. Ryan told Tony to plant the test seed. He chose a shriveled vegetable seed from a bag of garbage, dropped it in the dirt, and stepped back. The plant grew. not slowly. The vine cleared his head in seconds. The fruit was the size of his torso. It was a tomato. It was tomato red the way tomatoes were tomato red. It was warm. Bachan sat down on the dirt and cried. Rion plucked the tomato off the vine. It took both hands and told the household that they were going to be able to feed 100 people if they kept this up. Sakura tackled her from behind in gratitude. Gaara joined her. Anastasia pulled both of them off and announced that the harvest festival would begin at dinner. The smell of the crops did what the smell of the crops should have been expected to do. 3 days into the new farming cycle, Gaara came back from her route with her good ear cocked and a look on her face that Ryan was learning to read as a warning. She told Ryan the Bone Tree Sea was wrong. Things were moving in it. She had seen tracks at the perimeter that morning, large, segmented, and pulling away from the forest in the direction of the field. By the time the sun was sinking, the first scouts came out. Steel ants, 2 meters long, plated in dark metal carapace, mandibles that could crush rock, 3 of them. The first wave was supposed to be 3. They moved fast for things that big. Kira drew her sword and met them at the perimeter line. The blade hit the front ant's carapace and snapped at the 3rd inch like the steel had been a candy stick. She kicked the ant back, swore, once, briefly, and pulled back to where Ryan was. Ryan was already running specification change on the dirt under the ant's feet. The ground opened. A pit, 10 meters wide, 5 meters deep, lined at the bottom with stakes she had been pre-shaping out of bone tree logs that morning. The ants fell. Sakura, above the pit, dropped a compressed fireball into it and incinerated the survivors. The whole engagement took under a minute. Ryan bought the corpses. The shells did not burn. They went into inventory at full integrity. Kira was apologizing about the sword by the time Ryan reached her. Ryan told her to stop. The sword had not been good enough for what it had been asked to do. The ants, however, had been very good at being hard, so they would use the ants. Ryan walked her to the small forge area they had set up against the east wall. She opened inventory. She pulled out the carapace plates and the mandibles. She ran market research on them. SR rarity, structural strength categorically beyond standard kingdom steel. Then she ran specification change with the broken sword as base material and the carapace as merge target. The skill warmed under her palm. The black plates flowed into the steel like water into a cup. The blade reformed, longer, thinner, blacker. The hilt fit Kira's hand because the skill remembered her grip. Ryan gave it back to her. Kira tested the edge against a rock at her feet. The rock came apart in 2 clean halves. She did not say anything for a moment. Then she nodded. They forged 24 more. Ryan distributed them across Gaara's wolves. Each weapon and each shield came out of the same recipe, scaled to the user. The household, which had spent the morning being a farm operation, became a small armed force by sundown. Gaara, who had been hauling carapace plates with her restored arm and watching the line of finished blades with a fierce, satisfied expression, made the kind of remark a captain makes when she suddenly has a real unit. Ryan let her have it. The wall went up the next morning. Bone tree logs, processed through product repair until the surface was as hard as enameled bone, set into a continuous palisade 3 meters tall around the field, the mansion, and the household quarters. Specification: change shaped the post bases into the earth. Pitfall traps with bone tree spikes flanked the only approach corridor. Watch posts at the corners, loopholes for archers. The wolves built the way they fought, fast, organized. With an instinct for coverage Anastasia was already studying with professional interest. Ryan worked the perimeter with Gaara through the day. Gaara showed her where she would have attacked from if she were a steel ant scout, and Ryan built more spikes there. She bought every additional ant scout that came near the perimeter on the way. The smell of the SSR farmland was pulling them in steadily, and every kill was a deposit into her recycle points. Each scout fed the wall they were trying to break. By the time the sun was halfway down, the wall was complete. By the time it was fully down, every wolf in the gang was at a position. By the time the first stars showed, the kitchen had served a quick hot meal that nobody wasted time on. The orphans were inside. Bachan and the elderly were inside. Tony, who had asked to be on the wall and been told no, had agreed without arguing because he had understood immediately that the wall was the line his sisters slept behind. Then the tree line moved. Not 3 ants, not a wave. The whole far edge of the Bone Tree Sea, a long, unbroken line of motion in the darkness. Red eyes, hundreds of them, then thousands, in steady rows that stretched as far as the wall could see. The footsteps under them came in waves, not metaphor, actual waves, like sound from a coastline. Kira, beside Ryan on the wall, drew the black shell demon sword. Sakura, in the air above the gate, lit 2 compressed suns in her palms and started warming them. Anastasia, at her position behind the gate, finished her second incant and held it on a hairline so it could deploy on a single word. Gaara walked the line of the wolves and said something quietly to each of them in turn. By the time she was done, Every face on the wall was set. Ryan stood at the center of the gate with the new short sword in her belt that she had not yet had reason to draw, and she looked out at the line of red eyes that was about to become something she had built every wall and every weapon and every devoted retainer in her household to handle. She had been told her whole short life that the world had decided who she was. The world had ranked her. The world had handed her a verdict at age 8. The world had been wrong, and the world was about to find out how wrong, and she was going to charge it for the lesson. She gave the order. The night battle began. Sakura dropped the first fireball at 30 meters out. The compressed sun came off her palms in an underhand pitch and arced through the dark and detonated above the lead column of the horde. The flash lit the field and the wall and the faces of every wolf in position. The vanguard, 50 ants at least, went down all at once. The ones behind them did not slow. Anastasia's voice, behind Rian, gave the order to the second line. The traps tripped on her timing, not on contact, the way she had trained the wolves to set them. The corridor between the gate and the field collapsed in 3 sections. The leading ranks fell into the bone spike pits. The screech they made on impact was the sound a thing makes when its shell splits at the seam. The pits started filling up. Ryan gave the next order without using her voice. She lifted her hand. Anastasia saw it and finished her second incant. Ice came down, a cold storm that filled the trenches and turned every ant inside them brittle. The shells, already cracked from the bone spikes, went the rest of the way. Anything still moving was finished by the wolves on the rim with their black shell weapons. 2 minutes, maybe 3. The first wave was over. Gara called out positions. The line held. The second wave was bigger. Ants flowed around the trench corridor and tried for the wall directly. Sakura switched to controlled bursts. Short fire, aimed. Conservative on her mana. The wolves on the parapets fought in pairs, sword and shield, the way Gara had drilled them. The black shell weapons cut through the carapaces cleanly. Ants died and were bought. Recycle points climbed. The night was a moving line of bright fire and dull metal and red eyes that went out one by one. Ryan stayed at the gate. She stayed where the household could see her. She did not draw the short sword. She did not need to. By the time the second wave finished, her point counter was past 40,000. The kill zone was a ground that had stopped looking like a kill zone and started looking like a place where steel ants had ceased to exist. Then Gara's nose came up. She had been on the right tower watching the tree line. Her good ear cocked. Her good hand went still. She turned to Ryan. The look on her face was not a captain's look. It was an animal look. The kind a person gets when they have been hunted before and have just heard the larger thing coming through the brush. Boss? Her voice was flat. Something bad. The tree line bent. She was the size of a small barn. The steel ant queen came through the tree line like an avalanche made of segments. 2.5 times the height of the largest worker they had killed. Black plate over black plate over black plate. A horn on her head shaped like a crown and looking too clean for what she had walked through to get here. Her eyes were small and dim and absolutely not stupid. She roared. The sound was not a sound. The sound was a low frequency that traveled through the wall under their feet and into their chests and made decisions for their bodies before they made them themselves. 3 of the wolves on the parapet collapsed where they stood. 1 vomited. 2 fell back from the wall and had to be caught. The line bent. The line did not break. Anastasia, behind Ryan, said something quiet to herself that was not an incant. Kira, beside Ryan, drew the black shell demon sword and held it at her side. Sakura, in the air above the gate, was already gathering her remaining reserve into a second sun. Ryan looked at the queen. The queen looked at her. She had time in that moment to think that she was 8 years old and that her grandmother had told her once that the difference between a person who quit and a person who finished was almost never about the size of the thing they were facing. Then she looked at Kira and she gave her the order. Kira did not nod. She did not say, of course. She put the black shell demon sword across her shoulder and stepped up onto the rampart's outer edge, the side that faced the field, and ran. She ran along the rampart. She did not stop at the parapet. She launched off the corner of the wall into the air, 4 meters above the field, and the moonlight caught the blade in her hand. Anastasia, beside Ryan, sucked in a single breath. Sakura, above them, did not move. Gaia-style secret art. Kira had told Ryan the name of it once when she asked. The English translation was the kind of phrase that loses something in translation. The motion of it did not. The queen lifted her head a half second before Kira reached her, too late by half. The black shell demon sword came down through the crown horn and through the upper plate and through the soft seam where the head met the body. The cut did not stop. The cut went through. The queen split. She came apart in two clean sections that hit the field on opposite sides of where she had been standing. The thump was the kind of thump that ends a thing. Kira landed on the dirt between the halves. She straightened. She turned and looked back at the wall and waited for further orders. The second wave behind the queen did the thing colony-controlled creatures do when their queen stops giving orders. They scattered. They turned around. The line dissolved into the bone tree sea like water into sand. By the time Sakura's second son was ready, it had no target left. The wall was silent. The wolves were silent. Gera, on the right tower, breathed out once, slowly. Anastasia made a small note in her ledger. Ryan looked at the field. She looked at Kira. She told her to come back. Kira walked back to them, sword resting on her shoulder, a little blood on her face that was not hers. She climbed the wall. She stopped in front of Ryan. Ryan told her she had done well. Of course, she said. That was all she said. They did not sleep. The wolves on rotation watched the wall until the gray came up over the bone trees and the field stopped being a kill zone and started being just a field with a lot of dead things on it. Ryan climbed down at first light. Gera walked the field with her. Anastasia kept the count. Kira walked at her left shoulder. Sakura, who had been on her feet all night without complaining, stayed close to her right. She stopped at the larger of the two halves of the queen. She touched the carapace. She activated buy. The interface chimed. The number that posted was 100,000 recycle points. Then the interface chimed again. A second window opened over the first. White text in a register she had not seen before. Recycle shop has reached level 2. Storage capacity doubled. New ability unlocked. Remote purchase. Buy at range. No physical contact required. Ryan read it twice. She read it a third time, just to be sure. She told the household. Gera asked what level 2 meant. Ryan explained the storage and the new ability. Gera nodded the way she nodded at tactical briefings and asked reasonably what remote purchase looked like. Kira, beside her, raised an eyebrow that was not quite a question. Ryan snapped her fingers. The interface activated all at once. Buy on every abandoned object in range. Range, she learned in that moment, was approximately 30 meters. The field that had been covered in steel ant corpses and broken weapons and shed shell plates and burnt scraps from Sakura's fireballs, every part of it, converted to RP simultaneously. The ground simply emptied. The corpses that had been in front of them a second earlier were now a number on her counter, climbing fast. The number climbed past 200,000. The number stopped. Tony, who had snuck out of the mansion against orders to see what had happened, stood at the gate with his mouth slightly open. He cleared his throat. He told Ryan, pragmatically, that the field looked kind of plain now. Ryan told him she would put grass back if he wanted. He said grass was fine. He went inside to wake up the kitchen. The hot spring was the first thing Ryan built with the new points. She did not announce it as a gift. She announced it as a test. She had market survey scanning the ground under the mansion since the level upgrade. The new sub-ability called Resource Exploration showed the underground in a 3-dimensional map, and she had found a depleted groundwater vein 50 meters down, dried up so long ago that the stone around it had set. She told the household she was going to repair the vein. She authorized function regeneration, the level 2 version of product repair. The cost was 100,000 points. The ground shook. 10 meters from where she was standing, the dirt opened on its own, and clear water came up under sunlight for the first time in what Bachan estimated had been longer than the kingdom had existed. The old woman walked over to it slowly, stood at the edge, and laid her palm flat against the surface, and did not say anything for a long while. Specification, change at level 2. Free placement, no contact required. Ryan put a stone well around the spring at one end of the depression. Cost, 50,000. Then she put a hot spring at the other end. Natural rock basin, 20 bathers capacity. A rain shower hookup at one wall. Hinoki wood, changing rooms split for men and women. Cost, another 50,000. The mansion now had a working water source, a public bath, and an underground vein that would not run dry again. The orphans cried. Bachan cried. The wolves did the wolf version of crying, which involved dust on their faces and refusing to look at each other for a moment. The 4 SSR retainers stood in a line and stared at Ryan. Anastasia smiled. Kira folded her arms. Gera cracked her right hand's knuckles in a way Ryan had learned to recognize as anticipation. Sakura, beside her, was already taking off her sash. Ryan asked, in the polite voice her etiquette tutor had drilled into her, what was happening. Anastasia stepped forward. She told Ryan, with the formal cadence she used for delivering household decisions, that the public reward was lovely, and that the household appreciated it deeply, and that the SSR retainers would be requiring a private reward, the new bath, with Ryan. tour included. Ryan considered her options. She had no options. Sakura picked her up, bodily, like a rice bale. She slung Ryan over her shoulder and walked her toward the bathhouse. Gara fell in behind her. Kira walked at her eye level so they could maintain conversation. Anastasia, last in the line, looked back at the assembled wolves with the genteel composure of a woman who had organized everything in her head days earlier and gave them a small wave. The wolves waved back. What happened in the bathhouse can be compressed because the events are not the part of the story that matters. Sakura attempted to wash Ryan using a substance she had decided was acceptable shampoo and was not. Gara, restraining her, hit her own muscle pose at Ryan as her version of a reward. Kira used a real fruit juice as actual shampoo and narrated the procedure in language that did not require additional commentary. The interior of the changing room became loud, then chaotic, then somehow louder. Anastasia broke the chaos. She did it with one word. What happened next mattered. She set down the towel she had been holding. She looked at the other three retainers, Sakura covered in slime, Gara mid-pose, Kira with juice on her hands, and she said, in a voice that was simultaneously the same voice she used to plan meal rotations, and a voice that had never come from a human throat before, "Leave." Sakura's hand stopped halfway to Ryan. Gara's shoulder dropped out of pose. Kira's hands went to her sides. The three of them turned toward the door, not quickly, but not slowly either, the way a person walks when their feet are walking before their decision has finished. And they walked out of the changing room and into the men's side and closed the door behind them. The door shut. None of them came back. Anastasia turned her attention to Ryan. "My lord." Ryan looked at her. She had a fairly clear idea in that moment of what had just happened. She had been running the math on Anastasia's behavior since the duel with Gara. The way she had given orders during the night battle that the wolves had simply followed. The way she had stood on the wall and watched the queen die without flinching when wolves twice her size had collapsed. The way Sakura had stopped just now, mid-motion. Ryan had seen it. She had marked it. She had not yet asked her. Anastasia knelt in the steam. She told Ryan, in her formal household register, that she had become her antique, that Ryan's skill kept restoring her, had been restoring her, had treated her like an item that was worth being repaired again and again over the weeks since Ryan had picked her up on the beach, and that the skill at level 2 had recognized her as cared for, and had, those were her words, had given her something, a new ability. Word of God, she called it, the voice that compelled. She did not yet know its limits. She knew that it worked on her sisters in the household, and she knew it worked, partially, on Ryan. She lowered her head and asked for permission to demonstrate it on Ryan, briefly, so that Ryan could understand the scope of what had been added to her and to the household. Ryan gave her the permission, not because she had to, because she trusted her to use it carefully. Anastasia used it carefully. "Embrace me," she said. The word landed. The compulsion was a warm pressure behind Ryan's chest, the kind of pressure that comes from a request that is also already happening. Ryan did the thing Anastasia asked. Anastasia did not abuse it. She held Ryan for the count of perhaps 30 seconds in the steam, and the only thing that came through the contact was relief, Anastasia's, not Ryan's. And then she released the compulsion and stepped back and bowed. "Thank you, my lord." Ryan told her that the ability was hers, and that she would not order her to suppress it, and that she trusted her to use it on the household and on enemies, but never to push past her consent again unless she had asked first. Anastasia said yes, she would not. Ryan trusted her. The night battle was over. The skill had crossed level 2. Anastasia had become whatever an antique was. Sakura would calm down eventually. Kira had learned what her sword could do. Gara had a captain's confidence she had not had a week ago. The household had walked into the night as a recently consolidated thing. It had walked out as something the kingdom did not yet know how to measure. Ryan sat in the hot spring for a long while afterward, alone, with the steam moving across the surface of the water, and she ran the numbers on what they were going to do next. There were a lot of numbers. The market survey result had been bothering Ryan for 2 days. Most of what the skill detected resolved cleanly. Object name, rarity tier, buy price. The marker offshore had returned a status line she had never seen before. Rarity, unmeasurable. Condition, unreadable. Price line, empty. The system was not refusing to scan. The system was telling her there was something out there it did not have the language for. So she built a boat. She did it overnight using salvaged hull fragments from the territory's old wreckage and specification change to bind them. Product Repair coated the surface with a curse-resistant treatment that drew on RP continuously to push back against the Death Sea's corrosion. She tested it offshore at dawn. The hull held. The rudder held. The cursed water did not eat the wood. By noon, Anastasia, Kira, and Ryan were 2 miles offshore. The sea was wrong, not loudly wrong. Wrong in the small details. The way the water did not move when wind pushed across it. The way no birds tracked the boat. The way the air tasted like a coin had been left under your tongue. Anastasia did not say anything for the first hour. She had been raised to nobility, and noble training included not commenting on things that frightened you. Kira said nothing because that was Kira. Ryan followed the marker. They saw the wreck before they saw it. A shape under low gray fog, rising too slowly, too tall. The mast came up out of the water at angles that should not have held weight. A 3-masted galleon, big enough to be a kingdom warship. The kind of vessel Ryan had only ever seen in painted illustrations. It had been sitting in this place a very long time. Barnacles climbed the bow. Seaweed hung from the rigging. The figurehead was so worn that she could not tell what creature it had originally been. Ryan steered the boat alongside the galleon. The hull was higher than her reach. Kira jumped first, hooked, and pulled the line down so Anastasia and Ryan could climb. The deck of the wreck was wet, mossy, and silent, in a way that wet, mossy decks usually are not. Kira drew her sword. Anastasia, beside Ryan, gripped the back of her collar without realizing she was doing it. Ryan told them to follow her. She went down into the ship. The lower deck was where they were waiting. They came through the walls. Not metaphorically, through the actual walls, in a slow, practiced way that meant they had been doing this for a long time. 6 of them at first, then more, until the corridor was full of half-transparent shapes in rotted pirate coats with red lights where their eyes had been. Their weapons were the weapons of men who had died at sea. Short swords, belaying pins, 1 harpoon. They moved in a loose ring around the 3 of them. Anastasia, beside Ryan, made a sound that should not be described out of respect and clung to her hard enough that her knuckles went white. Kira pivoted to a defensive stance and brought up her blade. The lead ghost, older than the rest, taller, the captain's coat, said something in a language that was not quite the kingdom's common tongue, but close enough that the meaning carried. The ship was theirs. Their treasure was theirs. The intruders would leave or they would not leave. Kira's blade swung. The cut went through the lead ghost without resistance and without effect. He blinked at her. She blinked back. Ryan told her to stop. She told the captain she was sorry. The captain stopped speaking. The ring of ghosts paused. Ryan stepped forward. She introduced herself by name and by title. Ryan, lord of the territory the wreck was sitting offshore of. She apologized for trespassing. She asked simply what was keeping them here. The captain answered. The cadence of his speech changed when he answered, slower, more honest. The ship was broken. The ship would not sail. They could not leave a vessel that could not finish its journey. The regret was the regret of sailors who had been promised one thing and given another. They had been waiting a very long time for the ship to remember how to move. Ryan nodded. She told them she could fix the ship. The corridor went absolutely still. The captain's red eyes flickered. He asked quietly if she was sure. Ryan activated function regeneration on the galleon's structural points. The cost was 400,000 recycle points, almost the entire reserve she had built since level 2. She let it spend. Light moved through the wood under their feet. Hull plates reset. Masts straightened. Sails she could not see remembered their shape. The ship around them became a ship again. Not a wreck, not a coffin, but a vessel that had recently been pulled out of dry dock. The ghosts looked at each other. The captain looked at Ryan. He said 2 more sentences, both quiet, the way a man speaks when he is finally allowed to leave somewhere he has wanted to leave for a very long time. He gave Ryan the ship. He gave her everything aboard her. He thanked her. The corridor warmed. The ghosts went up. They went through the deck and through the mass and through the fog above them, simply and gently, like steam coming off morning water. By the time the last one was gone, the cold in the air was just regular cold, and the silence on the ship was just regular silence. Anastasia released the back of Ryan's collar. The treasure was real, and it was substantial. Gold coins from kingdoms, whose names Ryan did not recognize. Silver bars stamped with mint marks 2 centuries old. Cut gems in lacquered boxes. A set of jeweled goblets that would have funded a noble household for a year on resale alone. Kira whistled. Not the appreciative whistle of a knight assessing loot, but the surprised whistle of someone who had not believed there was treasure here at all, and was now revising her view. Anastasia found the chest at the back. It was small, locked, plain wood. She brought it forward. Kira opened it with a tap of her blade. Inside was a broken sword, just the hilt and 4 inches of the broken blade. The rest had been sheared off. The remaining metal was heavily rusted, the leather wrapping rotted, the pommel crushed in. It looked like something someone had thrown at a wall in anger and then locked away because they had not wanted to see it again. Anastasia, looking down into the chest, said the broken sword had moved. Kira said it had not. Ryan picked it up. The hilt was warm. Market research opened. The window did the thing it had been doing since Ryan left the territory. It failed to render the rarity. It failed to render the condition. It failed to render the price. Underneath the unreadable status line, in a register she had not yet seen on any other object, there was a single line of text. This object is conscious. Repair cost. Every recycle point Ryan had on hand, and every gold piece, every silver bar, every gem in the room. To repair this object, the system told her, the rest of the treasure would have to convert. Kira asked, when she saw the cost, whether Ryan was actually considering it. She was not unreasonable. She was being a knight. Ryan considered it. She considered the broken sword in her hand, which was warm, and which had been here for centuries, locked in a box, on a wreck nobody could reach, listening every time someone called it garbage. She considered what the market research line said about consciousness. She told Anastasia to load the treasure into her inventory. She told Kira not to argue. She authorized the repair. The treasure went first. Coin by coin and bar by bar, the room emptied. Each piece dissolved in a small pulse of light, and the cost meter ticked down. Gold gone, silver gone. The lacquered boxes opened on their own, and the gems lifted out and went up into the system and were gone. Anastasia watched it happen with her hands clasped in front of her. Kira watched it with her arms crossed, her face the polite professional distance of a person who had lost an argument and was waiting to be proven wrong or right. The cost meter cleared. The hilt in Ryan's hand started to grow. Light came up around the broken steel. The rust did not flake. It lifted. The wrap renewed. The blade extended out from the broken edge, not as a repair, but as a recreation, the steel remembering what its full length had been. The pommel reshaped, the crossguard. The whole thing finished a yard long and black as a starless sky. A pattern ran along the flat that was not engraved, but seemed to be inside the metal itself, shifting slowly the way smoke shifts. Then the sword spoke. The voice came from the metal, old, warm, half amused. "Why?" she said. "Did you save me?" Ryan told her she had been waiting too long in a box. The sword laughed. The laugh was the laugh of someone who had not laughed in centuries and was rusty at it. The blade in Ryan's hand brightened. The light gathered along its length, intensified, and stepped sideways out of the steel. And a woman stood in front of her, tall, adult, long hair the color of amethyst, skin the color of paper, a loose dark kimono that was wrapped less carefully than anyone present needed it to be. Her eyes were the same color as the pattern in the blade. Her smile was sharp. She inclined her head. "I am Gula," she said. "Gluttony, the first of the 7, and the only one anyone bothered to lock in a box. You repaired me at the cost of every other thing in this room." "I did. You have no idea what I am. I know enough." Gula looked at Ryan for a long, quiet moment. The amusement on her face shifted. Not less of it, more of it, but the texture changed. She knelt. Not the formal knee-down kneel Anastasia had used on the beach. A different one, older. "Then you are my master," she said. "I will not be in a box again. I will be your sword and your hunger and your hand. I will not let go." Ryan told her, simply, that she was glad she existed. Anastasia, behind her, said something diplomatic. Kira, beside her, looked at Gula's loose kimono and informed Gula, with all the patience a knight could muster, that she would be returning to sword form for the journey back. Gula laughed again. The laugh, this time, sounded almost happy. The Kraken came up under them at the halfway mark. Its size will not be described. It is enough to say that the tentacle that came over the railing was as wide around as the ship's main mast, and the second tentacle that came up the other side was wider. The deck pitched. Anastasia ran for the lower hold. Ryan held to the rail. Kira drew the black shell demon sword in her right hand and the blade Ryan had given her, Gula, in sword form again by request, in her left. Ryan told her to handle it. Kira handled it. She vaulted onto the higher of the 2 tentacles and ran along it the way a normal person walks along a hallway. She brought Gula down. The cut was clean. The tentacle came off in a single severed length. The severed length did not fall. The severed length dissolved, every cubic inch of it, into the system, into Gula. Ryan's RP counter spiked. Gula, in Kira's left hand, made a sound that was not a sword sound. It was a satisfied sound. The second tentacle came up. Kira hit it with the black shell. The cut took it. Gula, beside her, ate the severed end before it touched water. The Kraken's body breached the surface. Massive, wet, dark-eyed. Kira stopped on the rigging. She held Gula up. Gula said something to her. Ryan could not hear it from where she was. She could see the moment Kira nodded, and the moment her grip on the demon sword tightened. Whatever ability they used together, it did not come from Kira. It came from Gula. and used Kira's body as the channel. A black jaw, bigger than the Kraken, opened in the air above the deck. The Kraken went into it. The Kraken did not come back out. The jaw closed. The system ran a long string of RP deposits across Ryan's counter that she did not have time to read individually. Kira sagged on the rigging. Gula caught her, not as a sword, as the woman materialized for half a second to set Kira down on the deck and then dissolving back into her sword form. Ryan walked to where Kira was sitting. Kira looked up at her. She looked down at the blade in her left hand. "She is mine to use," Kira said quietly. "I will allow her to remain." Gula, in the metal, made a small pleased sound. The sea cleared. The galleon rode forward through the thinning fog. Anastasia came up from the hold. The dead-end coast was visible on the horizon. The territory was getting closer. Ryan had spent every recycle point she had owned that morning. She had earned the entire amount back, and more, in less than 3 hours. She had the ship, she had the sword. She had 2 SSR retainers who were now arguing about whose authority Gula fell under, the way 2 SSR retainers argue about anything new. She had not yet figured out what she was going to do with a galleon, but she was going to figure it out. The galleon had nowhere to go without a navigator. Anastasia explained the problem over the morning ledger. The Death Sea had currents no kingdom map could draw. The reefs were not where the charts said they were. The sea fish were not the sea fish. A galleon without a fish person at the helm was a galleon waiting for the bottom of the ocean. The kingdom's experienced sirens were employed elsewhere. The cheap supply was the slave market in the waste city, where damaged fish people were sold off when their owners decided they were not worth keeping. Ryan ran market survey from the dock. The result came back fast. 1 marker. Waste city slum. Slave tent. Unrated rarity. Condition flagged as cursed, she told the household she was going. They went the same morning. Ryan, Anastasia, Kira, Gara, with Gula in sword form on Kira's hip. The slave tent was at the back of the slum, behind a row of broken stalls, in the kind of canvas-covered space where light gave up halfway through the entrance. The merchant who ran it was a pale, soft man with a smile he had practiced too long. He tried to put a hand on Ryan's shoulder. Kira put her hand on her sword. The merchant moved his hand back to his side. He showed them his stock. The cages were stacked 3 high. Most of them held human slaves who looked at the floor. He led Ryan to a smaller cage at the back. He kicked it as he opened the cover. The thing inside was the size of a child, but not shaped like one. Half fish, half human, scales that had grown wrong, eyes that did not focus, fins that had been torn at the edges. The merchant called her trash that talked when she felt like it. He said he could not get a buyer because she had stopped being useful even as a curiosity. He named a price. Ryan ran market research while he was talking. The window opened. Mermaid descendant. Cursed by external dark magic. Vocal cords damaged. Fins damaged. Severe physical and emotional injury. Buy price, 10 gold coins flat. Repair cost on full restoration, 10,000 recycle points. The window also said one more line. This curse was cast. Ryan gave the merchant 10 gold. He took it greedily. He started to demand a registration paper for the slave collar. Kira cut the collar off with one motion that put the tip of her blade 2 finger widths from the merchant's nose. He decided the registration could wait. Ryan knelt in front of the cage. She told the girl inside that nobody had a right to call her trash, and that she had heard the curse on her, and that she was going to take it off her. She activated repair. The light came up around the cage, and the curse came off her. Scales unwound back into skin. Torn fins reformed and resolved into legs. Damaged vocal cords knit. Hair, dull and patchy a moment earlier, settled into a long emerald sweep down her back. The body that came out of the cage was not the body that had gone into it. She stood, slowly, naked, but for the rough sackcloth she had been bound in. Her eyes, sea green, clear, focused on Ryan. She bowed. The bow was the bow of someone remembering how to bow. Thanks. Her voice, restored, was cool water over warm stone. You broke it. I felt it leave. The merchant, behind them, made the sound a man makes when he watches money happen to someone else. He demanded that Ryan pay extra for what the girl had become. He suggested brightly that he would forgive the difference if Ryan traded one of her retainers for the girl. He looked at Anastasia and Kira and Gara and named a preference. Gara asked calmly if she could handle the conversation. Ryan told her yes. She hit him once. He went through the back wall of the tent and into a stack of refuse and stayed there. The thugs he had on standby came out of the alley behind the tent, 6 of them with rusted weapons. Kira drew the black shell demon sword. Gula, on her hip, made a small interested sound. Anastasia took 1/2 step forward, and her eyes did the thing they did before Word of God came out. Ryan told them all to wait. The siren, Marina, she had said her name was, as the repair finished, opened her mouth. She sang one phrase. Whatever it meant in her language is unknown. Whatever it would have meant in any other language is unknown. The sound was not large. It was not loud. The thugs in the alley sat down on the ground all at once. Their weapons fell out of their hands. Gara's fist relaxed. Anastasia's incant unwound. Kira's sword lowered, even Ryan. The sound made her want to put down the conversation she had been about to have. She did not put it down. She had been expecting the song the moment market research had identified Marina's speakies. Foreknowledge of a siren's song provides partial resistance. She had run the math. When the phrase ended, Marina turned to Ryan. Her smile was bright. The smile had a small, careful edge along it that Ryan noted privately and did not comment on. "I'm sorry," she said. "Force of habit. Are you angry?" "Not at you." Ryan turned to the merchant in the rubble of his back wall. She told him, in the polite voice she kept for moments like this, that he was operating an unlicensed slave market on territory under her jurisdiction and that he was going to prison. Anastasia, beside her, produced the royal appointment scroll from her sleeve and unrolled it and held it where his face was. The merchant read it. He went the color paper goes when it has been left in the rain. He started apologizing rapidly. Ryan told him to walk to the knights. He walked to the knights. The merchant had 30 other slaves in his tent. Ryan had not expected 30. The cages along the back wall, when Anastasia and Ryan walked through them, were full of people his men had not bothered to keep healthy. Sickness, infections, untreated wounds, hunger. He had been planning to sell some and let the rest die. Ryan asked them, one at a time, whether they had work or anywhere to go. None of them did. She made the offer she had made the orphans and the wolves. Shelter, 3 meals, fair wage, work you could do. Crew on the galleon. They would heal first, train second, sail when ready. They could refuse. None of them refused. Ryan activated repair across the line. Cost a few hundred recycle points each. 30 pulses of warm light moved down the length of the cages. Wounds closed. Fevers broke. Bones realigned. They walked out of the tent on their own feet for the first time in months. Gara led them out of the slum. Anastasia kept the count. By late afternoon, they were back at the coast. Gula brought up the galleon. She had been holding it since the Death Sea trip. The digestion clock had been a topic of considerable discussion at the morning meeting, and she released it back into the surf with what she described as enormous physical relief. The new crew climbed aboard. Marina took the helm without being told. She put one hand on the wheel, and her ears twitched once, and she said, with the quiet professionalism of a thing finally being permitted to do its job, that the wind was coming from the north and they should leave on the next sweep. Ryan asked her if she could navigate the Death Sea to where she needed to go. Marina smiled the bright smile with the careful edge along it. Anywhere, she said. They sailed. The Death Sea opened in front of the galleon, and the navigator at the wheel knew where the rocks were, and the new crew worked the lines under Anastasia's instruction with the speed of people who had been waiting to be useful for a long time. And Gula, on Kira's hip, hummed the kind of hum a sword hums when it is well-fed and content. Ryan stood on the foredeck. She watched the coast of her territory get smaller and then larger again as Marina arced them back home. She made a private note about the careful edge in Marina's smile. She would keep an eye on her. She would also feed her. Marina had earned both. The dock problem was the next thing. The galleon could not stay anchored offshore. The Death Sea would rot the hull within a season. Even with the protective coating Ryan was renewing daily. They needed a permanent berth on the coast, with a foundation that resisted corrosion, a freshwater system to wash the salt off the timbers, and quarters for the crew. The estimated cost, after Anastasia ran the rough numbers with Ryan at the morning meeting, was 400,000 recycle points. They had 40,000 on hand. The shortfall solved itself, the way shortfalls in the household kept solving themselves. Marina, at the helm, said that the Death Sea past the second reef had a population of A-rank sea demon snakes, 20 meters long, hard-scaled, currently in mating season, and aggressive. She offered to sing them to the surface. Gula, in the metal, made the small interested sound that Gula made when food was on the way. Kira drew her. Gula's voice came from her sword form. "Throw me at them," Marina sang. 20 sea demon snakes came up around the galleon. Kira launched off the railing with Gula in her right hand, met them on the water, and used a Gaia-style cut Gula had been showing her how to deploy through the sword's resonance. The snakes did not last long. Predation devoured the severed pieces. The point counter climbed, 200,000 recycle points by the time the last snake was gone. Marina sang a smaller note and a school of small fish came up around the bow. Gula took those too. Brutal gluttony. The point counter passed 500,000. Ryan told Marina to stop calling things up. The reef had to keep some of its population. Marina nodded. She kept the careful smile. They sailed back toward the coast. Anastasia, beside Ryan, was already drafting the supply list for the dock build. They saw the figure on the shore at half a mile out. It was small, dirty, and shouting. The figure was standing in the surf up to the chest of what appeared to be an old man, waving both arms, yelling at the galleon. Marina's ear twitched. She told Ryan what he was saying. He was furious that Ryan had repaired his ship, which he had been planning to scrap for the ancient metal vein in the keel. He had been watching that wreck for years. He had named it. He was now running into deeper water out of anger and not realizing he could not actually swim. Ryan told Marina to fetch him. She dove off the ship. 2 minutes later, he was on the deck, soaked, sputtering, and still yelling. He claimed to be a legendary blacksmith. He gave a name that was clearly a fake, even before Anastasia, who had read the kingdom's craftsman registry, told Ryan it was a fake. He demanded compensation for the wreck. Ryan offered him fish. He accepted the fish. He calmed down. Ryan asked him if he could design a dock. He laughed. The laugh was not amused. He said he could have designed a dock for her when he had hands. He held up his right hand. 3 fingers, index, middle, ring, were missing. Old amputation. The stumps were old enough that the skin had set. The hand was useless for fine work. The hand had been useless for fine work for a very long time. Ryan activated market research on him while he was still angry. The window opened. Dwarf, female, court architect, hidden under disguise. Real name attached. Damage line, right hand, 3 fingers, deliberate amputation, intentional career-ending injury. Repair cost on full restoration, high enough that Ryan checked the number twice. She had 500,000 recycle points. She had 960,000 if she included the reserves she had been holding for the dock. She authorized the repair without telling him. The light came up around his hand. The fingers grew. The dirt came off his face. The grime came off his neck and his arms and the hidden lines in his clothes that had been there to make him look older. He shrank, the body restoring to something younger and lighter. And what was standing on the deck after the light faded was not an old man. It was a dwarf woman, late teens or early 20s by appearance. Red hair in twin braids, pale skin, an unfamiliar version of the same face that had been yelling at Ryan a moment earlier. She looked at her right hand. She moved her fingers, all 5. She did not say anything for a long time. When she spoke, the name she gave was the name in the market research window, not the fake one, Tor. She had used the disguise for survival. She had not had her real fingers in years. Ryan told her welcome. Anastasia, beside her, made the formal welcome to the household. Tor said, very quietly, that she wanted to design their dock, not because of the fingers, because she wanted to. Ryan told her to draw. Tor drew the dock from memory. She used a piece of driftwood charcoal on a flat board of weathered ship plank. She did not need a straight edge. She did not need a compass. The strokes came out of her hand the way water comes out of a tap, steady, even, and exactly where she meant them to land. Anastasia, beside Ryan, kept saying the word extraordinary under her breath at intervals that suggested she had stopped meaning to say it out loud. The drawing took 15 minutes. It was a complete dock, circular berth, movable water gate, block fixings sized to their galleon's specific keel, a seawater filtration system using broken magic stones from the wreck salvage as filter cores. Tor explained that filtered water on the dock would prevent barnacle growth and rot indefinitely. Living quarters along one side, kitchen ventilation drawn out separately so it would not blow oil into the bath, drainage, storage, a small fortified gatehouse for night security. She turned the board around when she finished and held it up to Ryan. Her hand was shaking slightly. Ryan did not say anything about that. Ryan asked her if she had built any of this in her previous life. Tor told her she had drawn pieces of it in 100 different commissions, but had never been allowed to combine all of them in one structure. The court she had served had been very particular about scope. Ryan told her this scope was hers to keep. Tor did not cry, exactly. Her eyes did the thing eyes do when a person is choosing not to cry by force of will, and she nodded once, sharply, and turned the board back toward the surf. Anastasia handed Ryan the board. Ryan authorized specification change. Mode, structural construction. Cost, 400,000 recycle points. Range, the entire stretch of beach Tor had marked. The garbage on the shore, wreck planks, twisted iron, broken stone, decades of debris the Death Sea had thrown back, lifted into the air all at once. It moved. It reformed. The shore reorganized itself. By the time the light settled, there was a dock where the garbage had been. Real wood, real stone, real iron framework, the water gate, the filtration tank, the living quarters, the gatehouse, exactly as Tor had drawn them. The galleon glided into the berth on Marina's quiet steering. The water gate, which Tor had built voice activated, opened on the words she had set for it. The The fit was perfect. The crew on board, the 30 Anastasia had been training, applauded, awkwardly at first, then real. Tor stood beside Ryan on the new dock. She had not taken her eyes off the structure since it had finished forming. "Master," she said. The word came out small. "I have been waiting for someone to do that with my work for 40 years. You can keep doing it." She looked at Ryan, finally. Her eyes were slightly too bright. She nodded once. "I will." The feast that night was the first feast the territory had ever held that included the entire household, the orphans, the wolves, the new ship's crew, the SSR retainers, and Tor, all under one roof in the dock's main hall, with fresh fish from the day's hunt and bread Sakura had baked from the SSR farmland's wheat. The dock crew sang 2 songs from kingdoms Ryan did not recognize. Gara made a toast that was crude and warm in approximately equal measure. Anastasia kept the wine watered for the children and undiluted for Gula, which was diplomatically wise. Ryan sat at the head of the table because that was where Anastasia had set her plate. She ate, she listened. She noticed Tor was not eating. Tor was at the far end of the table, in the new dwarf's outfit Anastasia had spec'd for her, drinking quietly from a clay mug and watching Ryan. The expression on her face was not the expression of a person who had just been given a career back. It was something more deliberate. She came to Ryan's chair partway through the meal. She set her mug down beside Ryan's plate. She told her, in the formal cadence she was learning every member of the household defaulted to when they had something serious to say, that she had decided what her next masterpiece was going to be. The word she used was masterpiece. The intent in her face was not about a building. Ryan asked her, gently, if she meant the territory. In a manner of speaking, master, Anastasia, beside Ryan, set down her fork. The room temperature did not drop exactly. The room temperature reorganized. Ryan looked at Tor. She looked at Anastasia. She told Tor that she would be very glad to have her engineering ambition focused on the territory's future, and that whatever shape her masterpiece took, she would consider seriously when Tor was ready to discuss it more formally, and that she should sit down and eat. Tor smiled. It was a private dwarf smile that conceded the engagement without conceding the goal. She nodded. She sat back down. Anastasia picked up her fork again. The meal continued. Ryan did not yet know what shape Tor's masterpiece was going to take. She noted the look on her face. She noted that Tor had not been broken into devotion the way Anastasia and Kira and Gara and Sakura had been. She had been restored into ambition. Different vector, same person. Ryan would be paying attention to her also. Later, much later, after the feast was over and the household had gone to bed, Ryan walked the new dock alone with the night wind off the Death Sea moving over the Watergate. The territory now had a galleon, a working dock, a navigator, an engineer, 2 SSR sword users, a captain of military, an Oni fire mage, an antique with word of God, and a household of nearly 70 people. The territory had also, that day, spent 1 million recycle points by the time everything was added up. They had earned all of them back, and more, and they still had reserves. She sat down at the end of the new dock with her legs over the water and ran the numbers. The numbers said that the Scythedon family, 6 months later and 300 miles away, was probably still telling people Ryan had died on a frontier dump. The numbers said the kingdom had not yet noticed how wrong they were. The numbers said it was about to notice. Ryan went down to the beach the next morning to think. The household was asleep. The dock was finished. The territory was, for the first time since she had been exiled, formally complete in its founding shape. Fortress, farmland, harbor, fleet, household. The next phase of work was internal. She had been planning to draft the city expansion outline at breakfast. The first thing she noticed was the plastic bottle. It was lying in the wet sand at the tide line, translucent, ribbed, a label she could not read but did not need to read. She had drunk water out of bottles like it for years in her previous life. The sand around it had a snack bag, also plastic, and a flattened cardboard box stamped with a logo she recognized in a way that put a small cold spot on the back of her neck. Chemazon, block letters, stylized smile. The previous night, Gara had mentioned drifter rumors at the feast. People from another world washing ashore on the Death Sea coast, mostly dead, sometimes alive, bringing things they should not have been able to bring. Sakura had advised against involvement. Ryan had agreed. She had also filed the conversation in the part of her mind that managed risks, because she had already been wondering about it for weeks. The cold spot on her neck got bigger. She walked back to the dock and woke up the household. By the time the sun was halfway up, Anastasia, Kira, and Marina were beside her on the beach with the wreckage of the cardboard box at their feet. Marina, who had the best ears, told them what was offshore before they saw it. The sound was a small, steady drone in the air. Engine note, internal combustion. A motor cruiser came out of the fog at half throttle. White hull, white wheelhouse, outboard engine, 4 men in camouflage on the deck drinking from beer cans. They threw the empty cans into the water as they came. They did not see Ryan at first. The lead man pointed at the dock and said loudly that the place looked like a good spot. Ryan told Anastasia to evacuate the civilians. Anastasia did not argue. She turned and ran for the mansion. Kira shifted half a step closer to Ryan. Marina, who had been carrying her morning fishing tools, set them down. The cruiser cut its engine 50 meters offshore. The 4 men got out and waded in. 3 of them carried submachine guns slung over their shoulders. The 4th, the loud one, had a sidearm at his hip and the kind of bearing a person gets from a story he has decided to tell about himself. He climbed out of the surf onto the sand and stopped when he saw Ryan. He squinted. He started laughing. He told the men with him that there were locals. He told them, on a louder beat, that the lord of the territory was a child. He introduced himself with a grand gesture that he had clearly practiced as Ikatari Taru, drifter, Kamazan user, leader of the squad called Black Impulse, currently in the market for a dock and some slaves. He said it in a way that meant he had said it before to other small communities, and they had complied. Ryan looked at him. She looked at his men. She looked at the cans bobbing in the surf behind them. She told him politely that he was welcome to leave the same way he had arrived. He fired into the sand at her feet. The submachine gun in his lieutenant's hands burst 3 rounds. The sand puffed where the bullets landed. The threat was a familiar grammar from his world. He waited for the locals to flinch. Ryan did not flinch. He shrugged. He told his men to fire. The first burst came at her at point-blank range. The bullets left the barrels of 3 submachine guns. The moment they cleared the muzzle, ownership transferred. The round was no longer the property of the gunman. It was abandoned property in flight. Buy activated. Remote purchase, since level 2, did the work without contact. The bullets converted to recycle points before any of them traveled half a meter. Ryan stood still. The bullets stopped reaching her. The interface posted the rate. Each round was 400 recycle points. The lieutenant shot through his magazine. 40 rounds, 16,000 recycle points. Reload. Second magazine. Same result. 16,000 more. Taru's face changed. He told the lieutenant to advance and stab. He pulled a knife from his belt. The other 2 opened up on full auto. They emptied magazines into the air around Ryan. None of the rounds landed. Her counter, on the side of her vision, kept climbing. When the 4 of them charged with their knives, Ryan took 2 steps back behind Kira. Kira did not wait for orders. She did not need them. She was holding the black shell demon sword in her right hand and Gula in her left, the way she had been holding both since the Kraken. The 4 men reached her. She moved through them. Wrist strike on the first one, blunt edge of Gula, solar plexus on the second, chin on the third, pommel on the fourth. Each of them folded in turn. None of them died. Kira had been listening at the morning briefing about no casualties. They lay in the sand, conscious, weapons in the wet, gasping in the way men gasp when their diaphragms have been hit hard enough to make a point. Taru stood 10 meters back. He was sweating now. The story he had been telling about himself was not the story that was happening on this beach. He shouted something at his lieutenant, something about being a chosen hero, and he reached for his sidearm. Ryan tilted her head at him. Marina, beside her, opened her mouth. Ryan held up one hand. Marina closed it without singing. Ryan wanted Taru to escalate. He escalated. He shouted at the air above his head. He shouted the word Kamazan. He shouted the word purchase. The air above the beach distorted. Mass appeared. A weight pressed down on the beach so hard the sand crushed under it. The cruiser, in the surf behind him, rocked at the displacement. A modern main battle tank materialized between them. 60 tons, painted desert tan, treads sinking into the wet sand. The barrel, long, fluted, recently cleaned, rotated toward Ryan. Taru climbed up onto the deck and slid down through the commander's hatch. The hatch closed with a clang. Ryan waited. The cannon fired. The shell came at her at close range, point blank, on a flat trajectory, the kind of round designed to penetrate armor and detonate inside an enclosed space. Ryan had been waiting for it. She activated buy on the shell mid-flight. The transfer happened cleanly. The shell vanished from the air between them and went into her inventory at full integrity. The interface logged the transaction. High explosive shell, 800 recycle points base value, stored in subspace. She held the shell in inventory for 1 heartbeat. Then she released it. The release point she had selected was a specific spatial coordinate. The storage skill at level 2 did precise placements without contact, the same way remote purchase did. The coordinate she had chosen was approximately 1.5 meters above Taru's head, inside the tank. The shell appeared inside the breech of the cannon, behind the turret where the loader stood. The detonation did the thing detonations do when they happen inside the place specifically designed to resist them from the outside. The tank's top armor blew, the turret lifted. Smoke and broken metal sprayed the beach. The bottom of the chassis split. Taru's voice came out of the wreckage in a sound that was neither word nor language. Ryan picked up the small short sword on her belt for the first time since Phase 2 and walked toward the wreck. She did not need it. He crawled out the side hatch on his own. His armor was scorched. His face was bleeding. His sidearm had gone somewhere in the explosion. He was holding what was left of a knife, broken at the hilt, 2 inches of metal sticking out. He looked up at her, at the small child in the simple white dress with the short sword on her belt, and the story he had been telling about himself collapsed in his face all at once. He charged. There was not really anywhere else for him to go. Anastasia, who had finished evacuating the civilians and run back, met him at the halfway mark. She did not draw a weapon. She did not need one. She said one word. The word was a kind of formal sentence Ryan had heard once at a kingdom court. She did not know exactly what it meant in the language Anastasia had used. She knew what it did. Word of God activated. Taro's legs folded under him. He dropped to the sand on his hands and knees. He could not stand back up. The compulsion held. Kira closed in. She hit him once, with the blunt of Gula on the back of the head. He went unconscious. Marina, offshore in the cruiser wreckage water, had already wrapped the 3 thugs in seaweed and was tying them to a rock for later collection. The household had executed the no-casualty protocol cleanly. 8 invaders down, 0 casualties. The fight had taken under 4 minutes. Ryan stopped beside Taro's unconscious body and looked at the smoking wreck of the tank. She told Anastasia, mildly, that they should send a runner to the kingdom's patrol. Anastasia nodded. She had already drafted the report in her head. Taru woke up tied to a chair in the dock hall. He looked at the ropes. He looked at the household around him. He looked at Ryan, sitting in the chair across from him, with her hands folded in her lap, and Anastasia at her right shoulder. The first thing he tried was anger. He cursed. He swore. He told the household what he was going to do to all of them. Anastasia, beside Ryan, did not say anything. She did not need to deploy Word of God twice in one day. He ran out of curses on his own. The second thing he tried was bargaining. He offered Ryan money. He told her the Amazon account he carried had reserves. Ryan asked him, mildly, to check his current balance. His face did the thing his face had done after the second magazine. He had been spending Amazon currency without realizing it the entire time. Each shell, each round, each modern cigarette he had been smoking on the cruiser deck on the way in, each beer can, each item the household had absorbed during the engagement. The tank had cost him almost everything he had. The shell that destroyed the tank had cost him the rest. The Amazon balance line read insufficient funds. He stared at Ryan. The third thing he tried was solidarity. He looked at her, really looked this time, the way someone looks at another person when the other person is the only one in the room who could possibly understand them. And he switched to Japanese. The language fell out of his mouth in the cadence of a businessman in a Tokyo bar. He said they were the same. He said they were both from there. He said there was no reason for them to be fighting on a fantasy beach over a frontier dump when they could be cooperating to take everything they wanted from the locals. He said, in the most genuine voice he had used since landing, that they were countrymen, and he had been alone in this world for a very long time. Ryan let him finish. She let him have the moment. Then she told him, in the same language, what she thought of him. She told him that she had been disowned and exiled and dropped into this place by people who were supposed to love her. That she had decided in the first hour she had been here to make this place hers and to make the people in it her family. That the people he had been calling locals were the same family she was talking about, and that he had treated her family as game pieces. She told him, slowly, that she was not Japanese anymore. She was a resident of this world she had chosen. She told him she would not kill him. She would hand him to the kingdom's knights. He would be a forced laborer for the rest of his life. He would work, or he would not eat. That was the same Japanese proverb her own grandmother had used. He started crying. Then he stopped trying to speak. Ryan left him bound to the chair and walked out of the hall. The kingdom's patrol arrived 2 hours after Anastasia's runner left. The lead knight was a bear-shaped older man in full armor who introduced himself with a name Ryan had heard before in court reports, a senior officer, sent personally because of the report Anastasia had filed. He took one look at the bound men in the dock hall and the wreckage on the beach, and he laughed once, not unkindly. He told Ryan that the men she had captured were the Black Impulse, a wanted gang that had been ravaging coastal villages searches in the kingdom for months. The reward for them was substantial. Anastasia produced the official scroll for the bounty claim. The knight signed it on the spot. He paid the household in heavy gold from his saddlebags. He asked Ryan, with the directness of a man who had seen real combat, whether she had fought for the gold. Ryan told him no. She told him she had fought because the men had threatened the people who lived here. He looked at her for a moment longer. He nodded once, with the small, courteous head tilt knights gave when they were acknowledging something they respected. He clasped her forearm with the formal grip of one warrior to another. He led the prisoners away. Ryan walked back to the wreckage on the beach. The skill notification opened in front of her. Recycle shop has reached level 3. Storage capacity doubled from 8 to 16. New ability unlocked. Resource sorting. Decompose any object into its base material components. She tested it on the cruiser. Resource sorting activated. The white hull lifted into the air, came apart along its seams, and reformed in neat stacks on the sand. Pure iron ingots, refined steel plates, copper wiring, black rubber, glass panels, precision engine parts in labeled bundles. The whole vessel had become a building supply yard. The remaining tank wreckage went next. More steel, more rubber. The cannon's barrel resolved into a tube of refined armor steel, useful and intact. Tor, beside her, made the kind of sound a craftsman makes when she has just been handed enough material to keep her fed for a season. The household worked through the rest of the afternoon. The wreckage went into Tor's storage. The cruiser engine, still functional, was tagged for later study. The reward gold went into Anastasia's ledger. The civilians who had been evacuated returned to the dock. The orphans gathered shell casings as souvenirs. By dusk, the beach was clean again. By full dark, the household had assembled at the dock hall for dinner. The mood was not exactly triumphant. The mood was the mood a household has after it has handled, cleanly and without losses, a thing that should have been larger than it was, quietly proud. Ryan sat at the head of the table. Anastasia poured the wine. Gara made a toast that was crude and grateful and short. Sakura kissed both of Ryan's cheeks before sitting down. Tor leaned across the table to clink her cup against Ryan's. Marina, at her seat, smiled the bright smile with the careful edge along it, and the careful edge looked that night less careful than it had looked the day before. Ryan let herself enjoy the moment. She did not yet know how long the moment would last. She did not yet know that the kingdom's patrol report, when it reached the capital, would put her name in front of people whose attention she had been hoping not to attract for at least another year. She did not yet know that the road she was about to build from this dock to the abandoned city, 15 kilometers north, was going to put her in front of the Waste King's executive in less than a month. She knew only what she had at the moment. It was enough. She refilled Anastasia's wine and asked her to draft in the morning the plan for the road. The morning after Black Impulse, Ryan started building forward. The territory was complete in its founding shape. The household was intact. The outer wall was the next problem. Wood and earth had held against the steel ant horde because Sakura's fire and Kira's sword and the wolves' discipline had filled the gaps wood and earth left. But a wood wall was not a permanent answer. Black Impulse had not threatened the wall. Black Impulse had not tried. The next thing that came at them was going to. Tor had been waiting for this conversation since the dock build. She brought Ryan her draft over breakfast. Outer wall, full perimeter, structural shell of stone overlaid with the cruiser steel Ryan had separated into ingots the previous night. The wall was 4 meters tall in the design, with crenellated firing positions, an inset gatehouse, and the kind of foundation depth that said she had designed it to be there in 200 years. Ryan authorized specification change. The cost was 300,000 recycle points. The reserves she had built from the cruiser and the tank covered it without strain. The original wood wall lifted into the air all at once. The cruiser's steel ingots rose out of Tor's storage. Stone came up from below the soil line where Tor had said the bedrock was. The materials reorganized along the perimeter. By the time the dust settled, the wood was gone, and a black wall, stone cored, steel-faced, 4 meters tall, polished where the steel caught the sun, stood where the old wood had been. Tor walked the wall with a hammer, struck 3 different test points, and grinned the kind of grin a craftsman grins when her math has produced exactly the results she predicted. Steel ants will not scratch this, she told Ryan. Good. The road was the next thing. The abandoned city sat 15 kilometers north, through the Bone Tree Forest. Tony's orphan crew had been making the trip for resource collection runs for weeks, with Sakura escorting them through the worst of the monster zones. The arrangement was the kind of arrangement Ryan should have ended weeks earlier. She had not. She was ending it now. Remote purchase, applied as a continuous wide area sweep, cleared the Bone Tree Forest along a 15-kilometer corridor. Trees, roots, monster nests, anything not anchored to bedrock, bought, converted, gone. The corridor was a strip of bare earth 100 meters wide and 15 kilometers long when she finished. The recycle points from the conversion paid for the next part: specification change, mode road construction, using gravel from the cleared rock and waste oil reserved from Tor's tank and cruiser dismantling. The two ingredients combined into asphalt and specification change laid it down as a single continuous strip of black surface. Tor tested the road with a horse cart. The cart did not bounce. The cart had not bounced once on a road in the kingdom in her entire professional life until that moment. She did not say anything for a while. Ryan told her she was about to get used to it. The road did not solve the distance. Tor explained the math at the morning meeting. 15 kilometers on foot, even with the smooth surface, was 4 hours one way for a child carrying salvage. Even with horses, the cart loads were small. They needed a vehicle. They had the tank and the cruiser still in inventory, but their fuel needs were untenable in this world. Tor's solution was a magical car, an iron frame body powered by a wind magic stone of high purity, the kind of vehicle nobles in the capital used for sport. The frame she could build from the cruiser steel, the stone she could not source. Ryan activated market research at level 3. The new sub-ability scanned for biological resources by attribute. She set the parameters: wind attribute, high purity, large mass. The scan returned one result: disaster class designation, Storm Eagle, cliff face 2 days walk to the north. In untamed forest, the kingdom maps left blank. Kira's eyebrow moved when she heard disaster class. Gula, in metal form on her hip, made the small, interested sound. Gara cracked her knuckles. Ryan told Anastasia she was running the household until they returned. Anastasia objected briefly. Ryan asked her quietly to trust her. Anastasia did. The four of them went: Ryan, Kira, Gara, Gula, along for the ride, and they found the Storm Eagle on the third day. The bird was a 15-meter wingspan of feathers and storm. Its eyes were a green that had nothing to do with the rest of its color palette. The wind around it was a permanent bubble that deflected anything coming at it from the outside. The first wind bullet it fired at Ryan almost took her head off. Anastasia, who had sent Ryan off with a fast amulet that boosted reaction time, was the reason it did not. Gara hit the wind barrier with her assault rifle. The rounds went into the bubble and lost their forward momentum. The Storm Eagle laughed, in the way some monsters laugh, and rose. Kira drew Gula. Gula spoke through the steel in a voice loud enough for Ryan to hear from where she was standing. "That wind smells edible," she said. Gula's predation, applied to atmosphere instead of flesh, was a thing she had been telling Kira she could do but had not had the chance to demonstrate. She demonstrated. Kira swung. The wind bubble around the Storm Eagle thinned, then cracked, then poured into Gula's blade as a long pull of converted recycle points. The bird, suddenly without its barrier, hung in the air for one confused second. Ryan pulled an assault rifle from inventory, one she had stored from the Black Impulse Lieutenant's gear, and tossed it to Gara. Gara caught it, examined it for half a second, asked how to use it. Ryan told her. Gara put the stock to her shoulder and lit up the Storm Eagle's wing. The wing came apart. The Storm Eagle came down out of the sky in a flat, ragged spiral and hit the cliff face with a sound that ended the engagement. Ryan activated resource sorting on the corpse. The skill resolved the body into its components. From the chest cavity came a wind magic stone the size of a volleyball, glowing pale green, perfect purity. Tor's specifications had said volleyball-sized was the upper end of what the engine could accept. The skill knew. The skill had given Ryan exactly what she had asked for. They carried the stone home. Tor built the car in 18 hours. She did the design work first: chassis, drivetrain, transmission, magic stone integration, suspension calibrated for the new asphalt road. Then, she did the assembly using the cruiser steel ingots, rubber from the dismantled tank treads, and a high-strength glass plate from the cruiser windshield. She used specification change as a finishing tool only. The structural work was hers, the material conversions Ryan's. The magic stone seeded into the engine block on her last fitting, and the car came alive with a low resonant hum that did not sound like any machine Ryan had heard in her previous life. The Black Lion. That was Gara's name for it, after the household's company name, Lion's Recycle Shop, and the matte black finish Tor had given the chassis. Ryan let her have it. The name fit. The car was 4-seat, low-slung, armored along the lower hull, with a windshield bonded to take small arms fire, and a pair of rotating mounts on the rear that Tor had installed without asking, because she had decided they would need them. The interior was leather. The seats were wider than they needed to be, because Tor had built it for a household, and then sized it down for the people who actually had to ride in it. Gara took it for the first test drive on the asphalt road. She made the first kilometer without screaming. By the 3rd kilometer, she was screaming. The car handled the 15-kilometer road in 12 minutes. They made the run twice that day. By dusk, the Black Lion was parked at the mansion gate with a small crowd of orphans climbing on it. Tony was inside the cabin pretending to drive. Sakura was sniffing the passenger seat. Marina was running her hand along the chassis with a small, approving smile. Tor stood beside Ryan with her arms crossed. She told Ryan, in the formal cadence she used when she had something to say that meant something, that this was the second masterpiece she had wanted to make in her life, and the first she had been allowed to finish. Ryan told her there would be more. Tor nodded. She did not say what kind of more she had in mind. Ryan did not ask. The Black Lion crossed the 15 kilometers in 12 minutes flat. The abandoned city came up out of the Bone Tree tree line as a horizon of gray buildings, 5 stories, 10 stories in places. The shells of what had been a real city before the kingdom had decided the area was a dump. The southern road delivered them to the outer district perimeter at speed. Bandits were waiting at the road junction. 6 of them. Local outfit, not the Waste tribe. Leather, makeshift weapons. The desperate expressions of people who did not own what they were defending. They had set up a barricade of rusted carts and old timbers. They saw the Black Lion coming and lifted their weapons. Ryan did not slow down. The Black Lion went through the barricade at 60 kilometers per hour. The carts came apart. The timbers folded. The bandits, who had committed to the bluff, did not have time to commit to anything else. The car went through the wreckage, kept its line, and was inside the outer district before the bandits had finished falling sideways. Gara, at the wheel, laughed once. Ryan did not. She was already running market survey on the city as they entered. The sub-ability that had found Marina, the skill she had been carrying since Phase 2, was now scanning a city instead of a beach. The data scrolled past her as they drove. Resources everywhere. Steel, rare metals, infrastructure scraps, magic stones and abandoned tools. The abandoned city had been collecting wealth for a century and never processing any of it. Ryan told Anastasia, in the back seat, to draft a worker recruitment plan. Anastasia had already drafted one. The base went up before sundown. Ryan cleared a 1-acre lot in the outer district using remote purchase on the rubble. Specification change rebuilt the lot's surface as packed pavement. She built a stone house at the center using salvaged bricks and the same skill. Single story, 4-room, defensible. Anastasia hung the household banner over the door. Gara walked the lot's perimeter twice and identified 6 likely approach vectors, each of which Tor immediately began designing reinforcements for. Ryan asked Tor whether she could build them a guardian. Tor had been waiting for that question. She had a design ready, a humanoid construct 3 meters tall, scrap iron plate over a stone core, a magic stone heart, voice trigger threat assessment. The Scrap Guardian, she called it. She drew the schematic on the wall of the new house with charcoal in 20 minutes. Ryan built it from the lot's debris and the additional cruiser steel she had reserved. Cost, 150,000 recycle points. The construct rose. The construct walked. The construct took its post at the lot's gate and stood completely still, a black shadow against the gray of the city. And Tor told Ryan with quiet pride that she had calibrated its threat threshold to read intent rather than motion. Anyone walking past the gate without aggressive intent would be ignored. They sat down for tea at a small table inside the new base. Gara, beside Ryan, briefed her on what she had been able to learn about the city from her time in the area. The geometry was a donut shape, an outer district where small gangs ran small territories under nominal autonomy, and a central district, the inner ring, controlled by something called the Waste King and the Waste Tribe, his enforcement caste of non-human creatures. The tribe enforced their order through one rule: do not defy the Waste King, pay tribute, or be eliminated. The outer district gangs paid tribute and were left alone. The Waste Tribe was on a different biological level from anything else in the city. Gara said it the way she said things when she had once been very afraid. Ryan proposed a strategy. Take the outer district gangs first, by negotiation where possible, by force where required. Build a base of operations in the outer ring. Approach the Waste King from a position of strength rather than exposure. The household had won every confrontation up to this point because they had picked their terms. They would pick their terms here too. Gara thought about it. She nodded. Ryan called the strategy the Othello strategy. Reverse the territory one stone at a time. Gara said it might work. She said the word might. The tea went cold. Tor was halfway through a sentence about reinforcements for the eastern wall when the explosion happened. The noise hit the windows from the outside, hard enough that one of them cracked along the frame Tor had set the night before. The whole house shook on its foundation. Anastasia was on her feet before any of them. Gara was through the door a half second behind her. Kira drew Gula. Ryan went to the front window. The scrap guardian was on the ground, not knocked over, apart. The construct had been 3 meters of iron and stone, calibrated to read intent, designed to last centuries. The construct was a pile of debris in the middle of the courtyard with the threat assessment magic stone cracked at the heart. There was a hole in the front gate the construct had been guarding, the kind of hole something walks through after walking through the construct. The thing standing in the hole was not bandit-sized. He was tall, over 2 meters, and built the way a thing builds itself when it has not been a humanoid for very long. Black scales over a humanoid frame, a thick muscular tail behind him sweeping debris aside as he moved. Sharp claws, a single horn rising from the center of his forehead, twisting upward in jagged points. His eyes were a flat black, with a reflective interior that did not behave the way human eyes behaved. His clothes, a long dark robe, simply cut, were not torn. He had walked through the scrap guardian without breaking a thread. He looked at the wreckage of the construct. He looked at the new base. He looked at the 4 of them behind the windows. He looked at Ryan, standing at the front, 8 years old in the white travel dress with the short sword on her belt. He spoke. The voice was even. The cadence was the cadence of someone who had been doing this kind of work for longer than Gara had been alive. He told them his name, Soksa ni Kiryu. He told them his title, Executive of the Waste Tribe, 3rd rank, direct subordinate of the Waste King. He told them, with the calm of a person reporting a clerical fact, that they were in his lord's territory without permission, and that he had been dispatched to handle the situation. He told them that the iron doll in the courtyard had been a competent piece of work, and that they should consider its destruction the warning. They had until the next sunset to vacate the outer district, the road they had built, and the territory at the southern end of the road. If they were still there at the second sunset, they would receive the same treatment as the iron doll. He did not make a request. He did not wait for an answer. He turned and walked back through the hole he had come in by. His tail dragged a small spiral pattern in the dust as he left. The sound of his footsteps did not fade. He did not run. He simply was, then was not. The base was silent. Tor, beside Ryan, was on her knees. Her hand was on the windowsill. Her face was the face she had worn the day she first saw her crushed hand restored, but inverted, the same intensity, the opposite direction. Her best work had just been broken in front of her, and she had heard exactly how the break was reported. Gara was breathing slowly. Her good eye was fixed on the door. Her hand was on the new sidearm at her hip. She did not move. Anastasia stepped beside Ryan at the window. She put her hand on Ryan's shoulder. Her grip was steady. "My lord," she said quietly, "we will need to discuss the Othello strategy. Yes, we will need to discuss it tonight. Yes." Ryan looked at the dust spiral on the ground where Kiryu had been standing. The pattern was already filling in with the wind off the city streets. By morning, there would be no trace of him left at the base except the broken construct and the hole in the gate. The household she had built, the one that had walked into a fortified frontier dump 10 months earlier and turned it into a working territory, had just been given a deadline by something that had broken their best defense in one strike. She stood at the window and ran the numbers. The numbers were difficult. She was already working on them anyway.